Well, Dr. Mark Meldrum, thank you very much for being on for the interview here. I'm super excited. I know a lot of your fans and a lot of the subscribers on my channel are going to be interested to see all the topics that we run through here. As a quick disclosure, Mark and I both want to say, before we get into a few of our topics, I didn't pay Mark to come on. Mark isn't paying me to be on the channel. I'll also make a point about the hat, the markmeldrum.com hat, which we're going to discuss later on. I bought the hat from Mark's website. He didn't ship me a hat for free to do some advertising. So we're just here for the purposes of putting together some entertaining content. And with that being said, Mark, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Let's jump right in.
So a very interesting point about you, Mark, is that you didn't start making CFA videos on YouTube with the goal of becoming one of the top CFA test prep providers. I believe it was sort of a case analysis for some research you were doing at the university you were working at. For those people who haven't heard that story yet, can you talk about how you started making CFA study material on YouTube?
Yeah, so it goes back probably about 10 or 11 years at the university I was at. You have a lot more flexibility at a university in terms of the content you have. You can pretty much control your content. I was having a camera crew come into the class to record the videos so that I could make them available online. Our university didn't have anything like that, and it was used quite significantly. That a class of 200 and well, not 200, so it was about 130 quickly became a class of 20 because the majority of people just watched it online.
Wow.
With no loss of grades in terms of when you gave the midterm, when you gave the final. There was no loss of the quality of the teaching. I just felt that, I'm presenting this same stuff semester after semester after semester. I'm saying the same stuff all the time. Isn't there a way to just put it on video and be done with it so that I can move on to higher value activities? But universities aren't known for their innovation. When I went to a different institution, it was governed by the Ministry of Education for Ontario. So you don't own the content of your course. The ministry owns the content of your course. So you can't just put your course online. As much as I wanted to put it online, I wanted to demonstrate that there is no need for us to continually come in to the classroom every single day. We could maybe do it once every 2 weeks. It would cut down on a lot of traveling. It would cut down on a lot of cars moving around. It would cut down on the size of facilities that you need. Try to push that through. It's rather, you needed a pandemic to get that done, believe it or not. Anyways, I started with the Canadian Securities course, putting it online because I wanted to demonstrate that a couple of our classes were modeled after the Canadian Securities course. I wanted to demonstrate that it would be used. Well, it got used a lot wider than just the institution I was at. But the problem with online education that was really prevalent at the time, I don't know if it is so now, that you don't get in the classroom is these massive decay rates. From the time they start watching the first video to get to the end of the course, the decay rate means like 3% would actually make it through. And at the time, Coursera was saying that they were seeing the same thing in their courses, that 10,000 people start, but only about 200 people actually finish the course. So you have these massive decay rates. So in the Canadian Securities course, I would put these intervention videos about every 3 chapters. I'd put one of those, those YouTube motivation videos that are 5 minutes long, that have these great speeches and they pump you up. I'd put them about every 3 readings. So if you watch the decay rates, they would spike after each of these interventions. So I thought, well, you can fix this particular problem. But the Canadian Securities course, unfortunately, didn't have the viewership I needed because, well, it's only Canada. So somebody mentioned, why don't you just do it with CFA courses? It's a much bigger audience. It's more global. Maybe it's different based on geography. Maybe it would be different in Asia Pacific versus Europe versus North America. Maybe what you're seeing is a very typical North American decay rate. So I did. And then that turned into more, which kind of left the research behind only because the demand for more increased and increased to the point where I had no spare time. I was doing all of that stuff. And it slowly became a business. It didn't, I had no intention of it actually becoming a business. It was really just me trying to figure out, how do I keep people engaged from the beginning to the end? What do I have to do to keep people engaged so that they stay with it all the way to the end? And it was never any intention to do anything more than that. And now it's well, now it's all this. We're now the second largest globally in terms of subscriber count.
We'll definitely talk about the business. I have plenty of questions for you around that. I think that's maybe where I'm most interested to talk with you about. But I want to back up just a little bit first in you getting to academia, and what about it made you want to be a professor? What is it about teaching that has been interesting to you over the years?
That's a good question. I've been asked that before. What drew me to academics? Because you don't go into academics to make money. It's from a public service. Nobody ever says, I'm going to be a millionaire by 30 and I'm going to be a teacher. That just doesn't happen. You know that you're giving up a private sector income by going into teaching, but it is something that resonates with you. It just is part of you. So it wasn't so much that I went into academics as much as I never left it, because even after I graduated, I went back. I got another degree and I went back. I got a master's degree. And then I opened my first business, but I still always took one course, always had one foot still in the institution. So I ended up doing a minor in Russian studies over a period of 3 years. And then I did just a computer science degree without any intention of ever having a computer science undergrad degree, just one course here, another course there. Once you have a couple of degrees, every degree is like 8 or 9 courses, and then you get another one. So I became addicted to that. It wasn't so much that I was credentialing or trying to credential. It didn't really matter to me. It was just the joy of learning. And I can remember thinking at the time that if there was a full-time job where all I had to do was go to school, I would do it in a heartbeat. Only because it was really where I felt the happiest, where I felt the most content, without any anxiety at all. And that's how and that's just how it worked out. The PhD seemed like just a natural thing to do after a while, and it was enjoyable in terms of, your first 2 years of a PhD program are seminars where you attend different seminars on topics, and every week there's 8 to 10 papers per seminar that you would read. They're the sort of the exemplars of the academy in that particular topic. And I enjoyed the academic debate. I didn't enjoy the research. I didn't enjoy the publishing. I didn't enjoy the tediousness of that, because it was less about knowledge and more about job security. It was less about truth and more about, you need this many publications in this amount of time, and these are the numbers that you have to produce by this period of time. Don't look to say anything really unique. Put one brick on the wall. You got to get tenure. Just do a paper. Just do this. Just add one thing. And it just seemed like you'd get a data set and you were going to find something. So you'd have competing hypotheses. So no matter what happened in your data set, you always had a paper. That didn't seem like truth to me. That didn't seem interesting. So I just wasn't drawn to that. But the intellectual chess game, that's debate of debating things at a higher level. I love that.
Well, hopefully we can get into a couple debatable topics later on here too. But when you talk about, the joy of learning, I think you mentioned in one of your more recent videos that even as a kid, you were the one hustling to learn as much as you possibly could in the classroom. Do you think that's an innate quality about yourself, or was it a part of your upbringing? Where does that come from?
So this goes to the nature-nurture argument, where we look at somebody and say, well, was that a product of the environment, or was that something that would have come out in them no matter what environment that they were in? And a lot of research has now almost concluded that it is primarily nature, that nurture doesn't have the impact that we say it does. In my case, it was nature. There was nothing in my early childhood or in my upbringing that would have indicated anything, any leaning towards that. I grew up with a grandmother who was a high school graduate, was genuinely incurious. There were no books in the house. There was no conversation about any social issues or anything along those lines. It was unintellectual as you can get. So it had nothing to do with any nurturing or any environment that I was in. It was just simply part of me. I was from kindergarten. I recognized that I was simply smarter than anyone in the class. I knew that, and I took pride in it. It was part of my identity as a kid, was that I was, either the smartest or the second smartest person in the class consistently, always. And I think it was by the time I got to high school, I was unsatisfied with just the books that you were given. I was unsatisfied with a lot of the topics that I spent a lot of time in the library, sort of going a bit beyond what the book would taught. I think the real impact was in university, was my first year university, where I had a history teacher. And it was just 20th century history. It was your social science elective. And I thought, you got to have a social science elective. I guess I'll take this because it's taught in the same building. I don't have to cross campus and go anywhere else. It's taught right here in the same building. Good enough. This guy was so good. He didn't just talk about it. He acted it out. He talked about the personalities, who liked who, what was going on, who was seeing who behind their back. And you couldn't get enough of the way you could see the passion he had for it. And that sort of dragged me into a whole new field of academics.
He made it about people? It was interesting because he made it about people and stories, do you think?
It's because I don't know that it was interesting because he did that, but he brought so much more to it than just names and dates.
Okay.
That this council was held on this date, and this was the day issued this declaration, and that happened. It was almost like reading a novel. It was like watching a movie, listening to this guy, and he made you want to know more about all sorts of things, and that really sort of knocked me off because up to that point I was really a numbers person. Any course with numbers that's exactly what I wanted. I lacked in topics like philosophy, or more of the the social science courses. I lacked in that, so I ran the risk of being a very stodgy accountant up to that point. So he opened up a way of looking at the world that was much broader than just the numbers that you're looking at. So we all think about people in our lives that were really influential, and usually it's a handful of people that really changed the course of your life. There were 3 in my life. That was one of them. To be honest, I can't even remember the guy's name. It was such an impact, one of those things that slam into you and sort of send you on a different trajectory, that I thought, when I saw him do it, I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to change lives like that. I want to impact people like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a history major. I want to be as good as he is in lighting fires in people to turn them on.
Wow.
So, that was,
Do you want to talk at all? Do you want to talk at all about the other 2, other than that professor?
No.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Or a little more personal.
Of these topics we've talked about so far, you mentioned the passion for academics. You started a business after, I think you said, an MBA before your doctorate. And then comparing those things to running markmeldrum.com now, which has been the most fun for you?
Well, that's a good question. Which has been the most fun? They were all fun in their own ways until they weren't.
Sure.
Um, academics was fun until it wasn't. And when you got into 2013, 2014, it started not being fun anymore. Um, business, my own business, was fun until it wasn't fun anymore. And usually it's not fun anymore when you're near the end. And the industry has changed on you, and you have to change as well. They were all fun. Um, but I would say that they weren't as rewarding as what I'm doing now, because they had a lot of practical application, but not a lot of intellectual challenge. So this does now. When I first started with the markets, this was years ago. There is where I found intellectual challenge,
Yeah.
because that truly is 3D chess. You've got to really think about what you're doing, and it is so rewarding when you think of something, when you strategize, when you figure out a trade, you put the trade on, and over time it simply works out for you. I don't know that anything is more rewarding than that. I love that game. I love playing that game. So I would say that where I am now is probably the happiest place I've ever been. But if you would have asked me 20 years ago, are you in the happiest place you've ever been? At that time, I would have said yes. So I think life is like that, where we go from a series of happy places to happier places to
Sure.
happier places. That
Yeah.
at any given point in time, you feel you are in the happiest place you've ever been, because if you're not, and you're a person of action, you change it. So if I asked you that question, are you in the happiest place you've ever been? I believe you're a father now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you in the happiest place you've ever been?
I think so. And I've always said each year I didn't like university, and so during those years I would have said no because I felt like I wasn't accomplishing anything substantial. So it really a different mentality towards it than it sounds like you had. And then every year after university, after I was working full time, and then especially having my first child a couple years ago, things are logistically certainly far more difficult when you have a kid, but yeah, more rewarding and everything, you feel happier throughout the days. Yeah.
And in 10 years, you will say that you are now in the happiest place you've ever
Right.
been.
Right.
And so, you know, I don't want to fall victim to this revisionist thinking, and saying those were not great times, because this is the best of times. All times were the best of times.
Hmm.
You were bumping up against your level of happiness. You just, like any human, push that level higher and higher. So that, would I trade places now with who I was 15 years ago? No, I wouldn't. Or the position I was in 15 years ago? No, I wouldn't. But that's progression in life. That you would not
Right.
go backwards. If you would go backwards, I think that signals that you took a wrong turn somewhere.
Yeah. I want to get back into the business now. One of the things you mentioned when you were describing starting your YouTube channel was at a certain point, it became a business. And I'm curious about when that was. How long had you been posting CFA related videos to YouTube, and what were the tells that it was going to become a business?
Um, the first video I posted um, was May 15th, for what I was doing. I had put some videos up before. My channel was around since 2013, but it was really meant just to communicate with my students. That if somebody said, I can't get this problem, I would solve the problem and post it to YouTube, as opposed to type it out and explain it. But I didn't get serious about YouTube in terms of reaching more than my students till mid-May of 2015, when I started Canadian Securities course. So I didn't start. I think this first CFA video would have been from the microeconomics series of level one, probably sometime in August, because I thought, let me try this out. And by Christmas time, I had 4 of the sections up, and I really had no intention of going any further than that.
Okay.
But the demand was there. I could see the hunger was there, that they wanted more of this stuff. So I kept going. And I did promise that I would put up all of level one before the exam in June. I would try to get as much up as I possibly could. Well, that invariably led to demand for level two. Unfortunately, it's hard to do. That is hard stuff to do, to get an entire level up while you're working full time and you have other obligations as well. And I still had my dog at the time, and my dog was 3-4 hours a day of walking.
Okay.
So something had to give. Either I had to give up on this and say, look, this has been fun, but enough is enough. I have a life that I have to live, or I have to make a decision that I don't want to live this other life and I want to do this. It worked out that this was more academically rewarding for me, because you had a student who did not have to be there but wanted to be there. So their intellectual curiosity was much higher. Their questions were more intelligent. You saw searching minds looking for something. When you go into an institution and you're sitting in a class where they have to be there, they're disconnected. No matter what you do, you're going to lose half of them. By mid-semester, 20% are showing up, the rest are not showing up. And I think it was in September of 2016 where I was leaving and I stopped on the stairwell and I thought, what am I doing? I'm not happy here. I am not happy here at all. I couldn't, because I was leaving, rushing to get home to get more content up.
Yeah.
And that's when it occurred to me, like, work now is an inconvenience to what I'm doing over there. So at that time I had the Vimeo channel, because I went from YouTube to Vimeo for level 2. And I said, well, if I'm going to do level 2, it's got to be more than just, advertising on YouTube, because that is not covering the cost of getting any of this done. I don't mind covering the cost of some things, but at some point, if you're going to sacrifice your life, you got to at least break even.
Right.
So I went to Vimeo, and the goal was always to be as absolutely accessible as possible. The goal was never to make money at this. The goal was to cover my costs. So Vimeo was $17 a month, and you could subscribe to level 2. And that's all it was meant to be, is just something to cover the cost of getting this done. And Vimeo keeps 20% of whatever you.
Was that your cost, Mark, to have the Vimeo account, or that was the student's cost to subscribe to you?
That's what they paid to subscribe to me.
Okay.
Vimeo 20%, and you got the remainder, but you're sacrificing hours and hours a day to get the content up. So by September, it had turned into a replacement. By mid-September, it had turned into a replacement for my salary. So I thought, good enough. I quit. So I went upstairs and I just said, look, man, this can't be my final chapter. I'm done at Christmas. And that was the end of it. I'll finish the semester, because it's bad form to walk out in the middle of September.
Right.
Very bad form.
Were you getting comments on YouTube, people asking for more in-depth content than which you knew you could charge for? Or what was there a catalyst, or did you kind of just say, hey, I'm going to try this?
I think the big difference when I first did it, because I wasn't trying to do anything in the space, I wasn't trying to be a provider, that I didn't follow the provider model, which is, in every reading, there's some stuff I don't have to teach you. You can figure it out. You can read it yourself. But in every reading, there might be 3 or 4 points that I'm going to describe for you. That was the model, was half-hour to 45-minute videos per reading. Some of my videos per reading went up to 3.5, 4 hours, because when I first did it, I took the approach of, I'm going to teach this the same way I would teach it if it were in a university setting. I'm not going to lowball anything. And if there's a formula, we're not going to say, memorize this formula. I'm going to derive the formula from the very beginning.
Sure.
Because if you understand it, you don't need to memorize it. And only in understanding it can you then interpret the output in multiple different contexts. So they were longer than what the traditional industry was, because I wasn't even trying to imitate the industry. There was a real hunger for that, for not being brought 60% of the way towards the knowledge, but being brought 100% of the way there. Okay. So I continued on with that. I thought, well, and my thinking was, it'll really just be the right tail, the top, 10% that really care to dive this deep into it. And that's wrong. It was, if I was charged on setting out in the beginning to design a prep course, I probably never would have made it as long as it was, because I would have looked at the industry and said, this is not what the industry wants. So by not really understanding the industry, I ended up, I guess, redefining
Yeah.
what online teaching in that kind of space can look like.
Now,
That you can deliver university style lectures and the same depth of content without, and appeal to a wide audience.
From the outside looking in, I was a level 1 candidate in the earlier part of 2016. There was information from you out there. I had watched YouTube videos, and I believe you were just using Vimeo at the time, didn't have the website, and you weren't a prominent option, at least among the message boards, and Reddit wasn't as popular back then. It was Analyst Forum. And me at the time, I was doing a lot of research trying to figure out what prep provider I wanted to use. And out of 100 posts, your name may have come up 2 or 3 times. And then when I was studying for level 2, your name was sort of in much of the conversations in terms of and your YouTube channel was more popular then. And then when I was studying for level 3, and especially now, it's almost like if you're using something other than markmeldrum.com, you're crazy. So your growth to this position, from my perspective, it probably feels like a lot of time and work to you, just seems crazy to me. It seems like one person, and I'm sure you have a very capable team, but it looks like one person coming in and taking down or taking on some of the biggest corporations in the space. So how did you, is it just attributable to the type of teaching that you do, or how have you taken this kind of market share?
Well, again, none of it was intentional. There was never any plan or any goal behind this, and I think that it is sort of a testament to how the free market works. That you can approach the market in two particular ways: is you can deliver something of value, and people will talk about you, or you can advertise that you're delivering something of value and try to convince people to buy from you.
hmm,
We've never spent a penny in advertising because it was never really, in the beginning, it was never really a goal to get there. It was, this is available, and if you want it and it works for you, that's great. All the growth is word of mouth, all of it, because we've never once advertised. It was all word of mouth. So my thinking is, if you want it to, in a true free market, there would be no advertising. And it would just, you'd have to compete purely on the value you delivered. And whoever won that competition clearly must be delivering the best value or have the best product. I find that once you start advertising, it's a form of persuasion,
Yeah.
which is what advertising is. I must persuade you to buy. It is, I think, far better to have the person at their employment sitting beside them persuading them to use us than us persuading them to use them. Now, if we advertise, here's the kind of ironic thing about advertising is, in our space, most of the providers are very friendly. I have great relationships with most of the other providers. There are a couple who they don't get along with anybody because they feel that competition means they have to put down other people.
okay.
They don't understand collaboration. It's all competition. But in speaking with some of them, I know what their customer acquisition costs are. This is how much they advertise. The number of people they get divided by how much they earn. Their advertising divided by how many people they have. When you have customer acquisition costs of $250, your price has to start at
Sure.
$250. You have to charge people and make them pay for the very advertising that you spent to get them to pay. Why not
Yeah.
just take the advertising out of the picture, be the best that you can be, and then you don't have to charge them that customer acquisition cost?
I think the majority of businesses, though, would tell you that paying for advertising is a necessity to them for them to be able to drive sales, and you're able to have tons of customers without doing that, mostly because of the social media reach and the quality of what you're doing.
Well, I would, I think if you go back to the early 90s, my business would not have been possible. So the idea of having a YouTube, of having an online forum where people can talk and people from all over the world can share ideas, and speak with each other. makes businesses like mine possible, which is why in the last 20 years you've had an explosion of entrepreneurship and businesses, because technology always makes that kind of stuff more and more accessible.
Yeah.
In 10 years, I might be displaced by somebody coming in with virtual reality and being able to
Yeah.
do a lot more in a virtual reality space than me, because I'm so stuck in my digital world that I'm not moving to the 3D world or the metaverse, for instance. Well, until everybody has the equipment, VR is not going to be a thing. But I think there's some interest there. In 10 years, who knows? Maybe you'll just put a VR headset on, and there I will be at the front of a class, just as I am right now.
Okay.
So it's 20 years ago, 30 years ago, yeah, I probably would have had to advertise. Today, if you understand how people communicate, I don't think you have to advertise. I think you just have to be very good at what you do, to the point where people say, you got to check this out. And that's always been our mantra, is to deliver overwhelming value. So even if we charged $5,000, which we never will, as long as we're delivering $10,000 worth of value, we're still living our philosophy, which is to deliver overwhelming value. And we'll continue to do that.
Well, it's an interesting proposition amongst providing education for CFA exams, because of the people who become CFA charter holders, I would imagine every single one of them would state that the value of their charter to them is more than $10,000. And then those who don't end up passing the exams, obviously it's not. So it would be difficult, I think, to try to come right in line to a estimated average value that each candidate perceives the charter as having, but you're definitely on the cheap end compared to the competition.
Well, the accessible end. I don't like the word.
Sorry.
I like the word accessible, because I don't consider our price to be cheap. I consider it to be accessible, which is democratic.
Okay.
Meaning that your access to quality education is not dictated by the size of your wallet, but dictated by the size of your appetite for knowledge. That's more important. Give me people like that. But if you have a certain price, you become elitist, meaning that only people who have the ability to afford that can actually gain access to that kind of teaching.
Yeah.
That's not what teachers go into teaching for. Again, it is a form of public service. And I don't know why, moving from a university into private practice, a lot of academics or a lot of teachers forget about that you're not leaving public service. You're just now enriching yourself beyond the value that you're delivering. And we have, in this space, there are a few that, in my opinion, charge a lot more than the value they deliver. Which, now that we're on that, I do want to talk about a video that you had put up about me a while ago, about how much money I made.
Okay.
And you tried to estimate it in a very analytical way. Some parts you were close on, some parts you were off on. I don't mind the video. It has raised interest in me from some previous girlfriends.
I hadn't considered that possibility.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I don't mind that video in that sense, but I would say to you that it is the wrong question to ask about anybody. And we see this today, this backlash against Elon Musk, this backlash against Jeff Bezos for flying off into space. The question, how much does somebody make, I think is secondary to how much value does somebody create. And of that value they create, how much do they extract for themselves? So you can come up with what's called a greed ratio. So let's say that I created a pill that will extend your life for 100 years. You'll never age. You'll stay exactly where you are for 100 years. And I decide that I'm going to sell it for $1.
Okay.
Clearly, I'm not a greedy person.
Yeah.
Clearly not greedy at all. I'm delivering far more value than I'm extracting, but I would be a billionaire. Now, because I'm a billionaire at the aggregate level, I would be seen as being greedy. And I think we focus too much on people's wealth and how much they have, and we forget about how much value they create. That if you look at a at some businesses and the price they charge for the products they deliver, they extract far more value than they deliver. So their greed factor would be significantly higher than Jeff Bezos, for example. What has he done? Think of the value he's created. His stock is being held in pension funds and growth funds and mutual funds around the world. So he's delivered a lot of value for shareholders. The creation of the EPUB and the Kindle and the ebook has created a whole industry of self-authorship, of authors who never would have ever been published before.
Right, right.
And people who read those books, who are getting joy out of those books, that never would have laid eyes on those words before, because the publishing industry determined what you could read, not democracy. So when we look at how much value he has extracted versus how much value he's created, this is not a greedy man at all. So if, going back to the video on me of how much, I may or may not be making, our price is set such that we extract far less value than we deliver. We pay our staff a living wage, not minimum, even for jobs where we only need to pay a minimum wage. We give in our community quite considerably, well over $100,000 a year. So, and my tax rate's 53%. So I take everything, whatever's left over, I make a big 53% donation to our social cause, which is, Canada and Ontario. Mm-hmm. So when you look at what I have left over versus the value I create, what would it matter if I had $1 billion?
Right.
The measure is, I think the appropriate measure is a measure of someone's greed, not a measure of someone's wealth. And you can have very wealthy people who are not greedy at all.
I think the comments on the video were either one way or the other. Many people thought it was a good analytical approach towards trying to estimate something like that, and other people said, "Why are you even asking this? Don't worry about his information." And I think that group of people probably thought that I was asking the question in order to place some type of blame, which certainly there are people out there who would place a high amount of blame to anyone who earns any amount of money more than they do in some cases. But no, I think it's a good YouTube algorithm, because there are a lot of videos out there about how much does Warren Buffett or Elon Musk make, or this or that, and you're the most prominent figure amongst the CFA community. But I totally understand what you're saying, and maybe that could be a future topic. How much value does this or that provide? Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. I think that the society would be a lot better off, and a lot more people, especially politicians, would be a lot better off if, instead of ranking people based on how much income they have and how much wealth, start ranking them based on how much value they create for society, and you may get a completely different ranking altogether, where these people may on a greed index, may be at the very bottom of greed.
And you might uncover some Mother Teresa type figures that would then have a certain platform with which they could, spread their type of word, because on a purely profit-based approach, that type of person doesn't end up in the spotlight whatsoever.
Exactly. Oh.
You talked about the earlier days when you started providing content on Vimeo, CFA study material. I understand this process may have changed or is different now than it used to be, but what did it entail to become a CFA test prep provider?
I'm probably not the best person to ask that question to, because I didn't start out that way, so it never occurred to me to ask.
Well, is there to be on an approved list? Was there an approved test prep provider list?
Yeah, there was, but I didn't pay attention to it. I was contacted by somebody within CFAI about potential copyright infringement in my videos using their content. But as an academic, I'm well versed in what's called the fair use policy, and any content from CFAI was in less than 2% of my videos. So I know I was well within fair use. So they said, well, we don't have to go down that road. Let's just make you a prep provider, and they extracted a check out of me, and that was it. I became an approved prep provider. That program is now over. This was the last year of the approved prep provider program. They still have prep providers. They don't call them approved anymore. So they have they have 4 different categories of where you fit in, and then you have fees associated with those different categories and different rights that you have with those categories. So while in the past, at the time, you had to submit your work, you had to show that you had original work and that you had the gravitas, meaning the background to teach this. So if you were just a high school kid, you'd never get approved because you have no academic credentials backing you up that says that you could do this. They'd never give you that stamp of approval. Now that's gone. I don't know that they have anything more than, here are the 4 programs. Which one do you want to pay for? And then you simply have to grow. It's all based on size, and you simply just have to grow into each of the tiers. I think that it was because there were way too many that were not very good. Way too many that were using permissions way beyond what they were allowed to use, and it was very difficult to police when you had one-off agreements with over 100 different companies. That's a lot.
Wow.
And if everybody's an approved prep provider, then the name approved prep provider has no meaning at that point. If everybody is going to be that, so if it has no meaning, let's just get rid of it. So I think that the moves that they're making in that direction streamline the process, makes a lot of sense, and I'm more than happy with it. You can't use the CFA logo anymore. That was being misused in a lot of places. You can't use that anymore. So any provider now, you'll see all those logos are just gone. It's not that any one provider lost the ability. Nobody, as of I think November 30th, nobody has the ability to use it anymore. So to become a provider today, you simply have to have the ability to teach. Not a common trait. There's a big difference between repeating stuff on a screen and teaching.
Yeah.
They are 2 different things. We've all been through university. We've all sat in classes where we thought, oh, dear God, I want this to be over. This is the worst teacher I've ever had. Because universities don't hire teachers, they hire researchers.
Yeah.
And then we've had some great teachers that you could probably count on one hand that were really good at teaching. The rest were, tellers. They would put a slide up and they would repeat what's on the slide. If you're a good teacher, I think online education makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of designations out there, and there is a hunger for this sort of thing.
What does it take to be a good teacher? You have to recognize where students are getting hung up, or understand how you need to communicate things differently to different people to help them understand it. What does it take?
I never really thought about it. I think that if you ask Picasso what it takes to be a great artist, I don't think he could tell you either. I think he just sees it. It would be hard for him to put it in words. And I think that which can be put in words is no longer an art, but a science. And I think that teaching is more of a craft, and a craft is part art, part science. So you can study teaching methodology, you can study pedagogy, and what approach is more appropriate depending on what you're teaching. You can study that, but if you haven't got the art form of it, if you can't weave a story through what you're saying, if you can't find 5 or 6 different ways to say the same thing and make a decision on the spot which way that you want to go, which way makes sense, I don't know that you'll ever have it. Some people have a natural talent for things. You can play sports with some people, and you can tell who has a natural talent for the game you're playing, and who actually is trying to learn it as best they can. So I think for teaching, I started tutoring when I was in university, and I was a sessional instructor for a while. This is the progression that you make on the way up, right? It always just seemed like a natural thing for me.
Yeah.
I didn't have to think about what I was doing. It just seemed natural. That it's a good question. Could I actually write down what makes a good teacher? I don't know. I don't know if I could. I could write the science part of it down, the pedagogical part of it down, in this context, use this, in this context, use that. Here's how you write assessments. Here's when it's appropriate to use this type of assessment versus that type of assessment. I could get the science part of it down, but not the art part, so that, like I say, it's more of a craft. It's neither art nor science, but it's a blending of both. I don't quite have an answer for that. It's just something I do.
Okay. With the way that you've built your following largely on YouTube, many of your customers and also potential future customers, or just people that have watched your videos, are big fans as well. They're customers and fans, which is unique of a lot of businesses. What's your plan for the YouTube channel into the future? Is it for entertainment? Is it for marketing type material? Obviously, you're not paying for that advertising. How do you plan on using it?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't been very active on YouTube lately. We have the 2017 level 1. That won't change. I won't be putting any more academic content on it in that sense.
Okay.
On our site, on the free side, we are updating this month. We're updating the free side, which is just YouTube. We're going to update it to 2018 content. So there's more of a reason to be off of YouTube and onto our site. The Applied series is going to start again in January because I have more time now, and there's a big demand for the Applied series, which is, taking the concepts from the reading and from the book, from the different levels, and showing how it truly just applies in the market. And I did a couple of interesting trades. I did some short straddles and some risk reversals in the market this last week when volatility is high. If you're not doing anything with options, you're missing the entire point of having high volatility. It's not a threat; it's an opportunity if you know how to use it. So I'll be putting up more of those on the YouTube channel, but those are going to disappear off of YouTube and be only for our subscribers, only on our site. So YouTube, I don't know what to say about YouTube. I think I'll always have something to say on YouTube, but I think what's going to go onto YouTube is the application of CFA content to more social issues, more political issues. How can we as analysts think about not just the market, not just a company, not just balance sheets and income statements, but can it inform us on how we think about some of the bigger problems in society in general, like wealth inequality or income inequality? Is that even a thing? Now, you could point out and say, well, I know wealth inequality is a thing. People are unequal. Well, is it something that needs to be explained in a capitalist system where you have free choice? Or is it just a natural outcome? Would the lack of wealth inequality in a capitalist system where you have free choice, wouldn't that be the bigger curious problem? Is how come that's going on? So I think that I'll use YouTube more for those sort of things, because what I'm finding now is, and as I've said to you earlier in the week, is we have some countries that are in the middle of a social civil war, where you have sides lining up on both sides, and they're absolutely intolerant to the other side. And whenever you move from the middle to the wings, you move from a position of tolerance, maximum tolerance, to intolerance.
Sure.
So if you go really right and really left, you will find absolutely intolerant people. On the right, if you go far enough, you'll hit the hateful groups, which are the nationalists and the supremacists. And if the left, if you go far enough, you'll hit the hateful groups, which are called the wokists. They both have the same independent variables in their regression to explain human behavior: skin pigmentation, gender, and sexual orientation. They just differ on the sign of the coefficient, but they're both hateful, and they both reduce everything to those three variables. I can tell everything I need to know about you by your skin pigmentation. When has that ever been an intellectual thing, right? So I think by taking some of the concepts that we can learn as analysts and applying them to some of these big social issues, my hope is that I can sort of bring people back to the middle, which is the most sensible place to be. Get out of the wings. You're always going to be wrong. The further you go this way, in either direction, you're going to be wrong. Come back to the center, because you can have rational conversations in the center. You can disagree in the center. But once you start heading towards your particular camps, the only thing left is the first shot. Who's going to fire the first shot?
The people on the tails of that political distribution probably have more in common with one another than they think in terms of personality and communication. If they can have different ideas, but the way that they process information and treat people surrounding those ideas is almost identical, it seems like.
Their level of intolerance and
Yeah.
their level of hate are identical. You give me a white supremacist and a wokist, and if you close my eyes, I probably couldn't tell the difference between the two, because they both hate. The only thing that would give it away is if they mentioned which skin pigmentation they hated and which one they liked. And we've had enough of this. I think everyone's had just about enough of this. It's enough. They've had the stage for far too long. It's enough. 80% of the population truly are centrists. That if you really sit and talk with them on certain ideas, you get the idea that you're not left, you're a centrist, and you're not right, you're a centrist. You're just center left or center right, but you're a centrist. It's these jokers on either side that dominate the conversation with lies. And you know what? If you're going to look for the source of all these lies, it comes from your politicians.
Yeah.
Because these politicians, both on the left and the right, I'm not going to single out any one of them. They're all guilty. They feel that as long as they can keep their voters angry at the other side, they no longer have to campaign for those votes. I no longer have to work for my vote or campaign for my vote. All I have to do is keep my people angry at the other side.
Yeah.
Whenever you listen to a Democrat or a Republican talking, what's the first thing they do? Say how wrong the other side is, how they're driving this country to ruin. Both of them think the country is going to ruin. Both of them think that they've got the moral high ground. It's the other side that's wrong, and they're doing it. And they say stupid stuff. Politicians say stupid stuff all the time, and this is the most insidious part of it. They don't say stupid stuff because they're stupid. They say stupid stuff because they think you're that stupid.
True.
And that's all they're doing, is they're treating their voters like a bunch of stupid people and saying anger is the most potent emotion that I can get your vote on. I'm going to make you angry. And it's not media that's the enemy of the people. Media is just a megaphone for the politicians. The politicians really today in democratic societies, these are the enemies of the people by filling them up with lies. Blatant lies.
And it seems to me that many of those lies are choreographed into slogans and phrases that can be used continuously over and over and over, and then they become inground within these people's minds as a truth. That becomes a truth to them, so that whenever there's a statement made anywhere else that doesn't directly align with that truth, then you're their enemy. And so it's these divisive little sayings and phrases that
you either agree with me or you're my enemy. You're either on my side or against me. There's none of this. You disagree with me, but you're my friend. That's gone.
Yeah.
That's all gone. And 20 years ago, that was there. It was nowhere near the vitriol that it is today. Today, the only emotion is hate. It's the only emotion is hate, because hate is so pure. And social media does a lot to fuel that hate as well. But the narrative, the very narrative of that hate is coming from your politicians. They are not your friends. They think you're stupid. And honestly, they don't give a shit about you. If they can keep you angry, they don't got to give you anything. They don't got to promise you anything in any election. They just know you're not going to vote for the other side. So, if I can do something on YouTube that even if I can convince a few people, that the center is a much better place to be, and if they can convince a few other people, it becomes contagious. But I think that now makes a lot of sense to make a shift that way, and because almost everybody I talk to is absolutely sick and tired of the voices in the wings dominating the conversation, when none of us actually believe any of that stuff coming from either side. Right. None of us want any of those people around us, but that's what we have. So it'll probably be more along those lines, but still applied CFA, but more applied. And what you think, well, come on, maybe you're stretching it a bit. How is anything in any of the three levels going to teach us anything about being in the center? Well, the conversation we just had about wealth inequality, the conversation we had about how much does someone make, and maybe we reframe the conversation as to how much value does somebody create. Let's talk about that. Let's rank billionaires not in terms of how much they have, but in how much wealth they've created. And as you said, you may find a Mother Teresa in there who's extracted nothing, but has created billions and billions of dollars of value for the
Right.
world. Well, aren't they the richest people? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I would seem to think so. If you want to impress me, don't impress me with how much money you can keep. Impress me with how much you can give away. Now I'm impressed.
And I think many of the finance gurus on YouTube who make their first $100,000 and sink it into a used Lamborghini might be near the low end of that spectrum.
I would put them at the very bottom. If you're surrounding yourself with things and possessions only to show other people what they don't have compared to you, you're a sick human being. But if you can show how many people you've elevated and what you've done to make your community a better place, I'm all ears. I'm willing to listen to anything you have to say. I love listening to Warren Buffett because he lives in the same house he's lived in for 40 years. He drives a Cadillac, an accessible vehicle like anybody else would happen to have. He doesn't have these outward signs of excessive wealth. He's given away the majority of his wealth to the Gates Foundation. He has an innate ability to create wealth, and he uses it. He doesn't extract the majority of it for himself. He's created so much value for his shareholders. He lives a humble life. Like if you just saw him on the street with his, droopy suits and,
Yeah.
and heading over to his everyday Cadillac, driving to the house he lives, which you can walk right up to the front door. It's not as if it's a gated community. You would never know that this guy, if you didn't know him, you would never know what he does. That's success. That's success. When he's gone, he will have a president's funeral, much like Mother Teresa had a president's funeral. But when you take, an extremely greedy hedge fund manager
Sure.
who passes away, it might make a small headline, but he's certainly not going to have people lining up honoring his life. You don't honor your life by keeping everything you make. You actually discredit yourself, I think.
Yeah. Well, in the interest of lightheartedness on your YouTube channel too, I'll make a proposal because one of my favorite videos from you was I think the day before I took the level 2 exam, and it totally caught me off guard. So you might want to lean back towards comedy in your content because I think it said the what to do the day before the CFA exams, and it was the day before the CFA exam because it used to be the middle of June for everybody. And I said, oh, I need to watch this. I was taking the day off. I was relaxing that day, and you said here are a few practice questions we're going to do, and it started off with number 1, which was a actual CFA practice question, and I kind of thought, why are we just doing 3 practice questions the day before the exam? And then you got to number 2, and it was relatively obscure, and I thought to myself, I don't remember this content being in the curriculum. And then you got to number 3, which was a joke about an accountant having a huge butt or something, and I bust up laughing, and I'll remember that video for a long time. So that type of stuff is and that's exactly what you need the day before the exams, right? When nerves are all you can think about.
Yeah, I stopped doing it because I had put one up, the very last one I had put up. One person didn't like it, and I
Oh.
said, well, if you don't like it, just don't watch it. And the answer was, don't cyberbully me.
Hmm.
Cyberbully you? This is not cyberbullying. If you don't like it, don't watch it. I mean, if I don't like something, I just don't watch it. I don't feel the need to make sure that nobody can watch it. I don't censor something for the whole. Anyways, they complained to CFAI, and CFAI has a
Oh.
tight policy about how you would behave when you're when you're acting in that capacity. And they didn't even watch the video. It's, well, somebody complained that they were offended by it. That's it. It must come down. So I
Hmm.
was that video was canceled, so to say. I was one of the earlier victims of cancel culture there. It was
Yeah.
canceled. One person didn't think a joke was funny.
I didn't know that. Yeah, I've thrown some nonsense humor into the end, the very last minute of a handful of my YouTube videos, and maybe I should be more cautious around a similar situation.
Well, it was a question about a stock, and it had a setup, and I said, what rating is the analyst most likely to give? Undervalued, overvalued, or no rating? And the answer was no rating, because all stocks matter.
Ah,
Ratings, microaggressions. Ratings, create elite stocks versus non-elite stocks, and it becomes in. And I made this whole woke thing about it, and I guess a wokist got really upset about it. That's not funny, man.
Right.
You know.
Do you have any, where you're at with the business right now? Do you have any long-term plans for markmeldrum.com? I mean, it's a site that performs a specific service, and you are obviously the quarterback. What kind of projections do you make for yourself there?
That's a good question. We've thought about that internally ourselves. We've had two significant offers. We've been approached
oh,
twice, and we've gone down that road twice. We said, well, we'll have the conversation, sure, because we have some bottlenecks that we can't solve. So we thought, well, let's see if another larger company can solve this bottleneck for us. Um, we walked away from both of them, for particular reasons. One is that we like our independence. We like what we're doing. We like our ability to be active in the community as we are. We don't want to lose that ability.
sure.
We do a backpack program for kids every year. We do Christmas for families that otherwise wouldn't have Christmas every year. This was our biggest year for it yet. We write checks to different organizations. The hat you're wearing, the hat you bought, as you know, is ends up being a significant donation to Big Brothers Big Sisters. That would go away, and our price would double. We know the price would go up
Mm.
as part of the acquisition, and we would simply have to just live with it. That's the bigger deal, is the price going up. I've had a good life. I have a very decent portfolio. I have an ability for me, the market is like a printing press. I have an ability to create value for myself. So I don't need to do it with this. It's more important for me to keep it as accessible as possible for as long as I possibly can. The idea of cashing out at the end, only to see it morph into something I don't want it to be, doesn't really turn me on. That I think I will do this for as long as I can, as long as I want to, as long as we all want to, and then I will dump it all onto YouTube for
Mm,
free. That's one last gift for everybody, saying, here you go,
wow.
Wow.
it's free now. And that's the way we would probably go out, is to dump it all onto YouTube.
You mentioned a few of those initiatives. I pointed out the hat at the very beginning of our conversation, but let's talk about that now. I think it was the entire purchase price plus another $20 you were making a donation to Big Brothers Big Sisters. Why is it that you're? Yeah, go ahead.
It's more than that. The hat was 30 Canadian. And then I put another 45 of my own money onto that to
Oh,
bring 75. Next week, everyone who bought a hat is going to get an email saying, if you send us a picture of you wearing the hat, I'll add another $25 onto our donation.
hmm.
Because we're going to have a page that's a collage page, and then you can hover over and it'll expand and it'll show the person with their name, comma, CFA, or whoever they are. This way here, we share the headline with everybody who bought the hat, because $30 did come from them. It's not all just me. So our accountant, had informed us that this organization, because of the pandemic, didn't meet some of its fundraising goals. So we felt, well, let's fix that, because we're in a position to fix that. Let's fix it if we can. So we set a goal of $25,000, which means 333 hats. Online, I think we sold 170. Offline, there's probably another 50. So we're almost there. So I thought, well, let's get a picture of everybody wearing the hat and throw another $25 on. We're going to see how we can get to that $25,000 and support that. I grew up with a grandmother. I didn't have a father figure.
Oh,
Um, and I know that when I was younger, I would have. This is something I really wanted. I wanted a big brother, because we had a chapter of Big Brothers Big Sisters. I thought it would be great, and I think I was only 10 or 11. but there just wasn't anybody available. It's funding, right? Because everybody's vetted. It's not a matter of, oh, I'll be one, and then, okay, here you go. The Catholic Church tried that. That did not work out very well. Just because you want to be a priest doesn't mean that you should be a priest, right? That did not work out. Same with Boy Scouts. That did not work out too well for them. So they dive really deep on everybody, but it costs you money to get that done. And you have some kids in this area that have been waiting a year and a half, 2 years for somebody in their life to fill that role. Well, if our money can accelerate that by, how many months, we're more than happy to continue to support that organization.
What is it about support for charities and, like you talked about earlier, charging less for your services than the value that you provide? You're a capitalist, but you described it slightly differently in the past.
I describe it as a compassionate capitalism. I do feel that capitalism is probably the best allocator of resources in an economy, pure and simple. Any business who simply is not meeting the needs of their customers should not stay in business. But it can't just be about the maximization of profit. Now we've moved from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism, where we identify a whole bunch of stakeholders, customers, suppliers, your employees, etc. And the goal is to maximize value for all stakeholders, which makes a lot of sense. I find today that ESG is being thrown around as a marketing tactic.
Yes.
How can we be ESG, but how can we tell people we're ESG so that we can make even more money out of doing that? I don't know that the belief is there as much as this is a hot term to use these days. It'll get us more investors and we can sell more products. Let's say that we're doing this and let's say that we're doing that. Meanwhile, all that they're doing just seems to make, business sense that, well, wouldn't you do that anyways? Wouldn't you try to reduce your input costs and reduce your material costs anyways? Right. Aren't you really just jumping on a bandwagon? I don't see that you really believe in what you're doing. So I think it goes with the thinking that, you don't go into academics because you think you're going to make your fortune there. It is a form of public service, and I don't think that leaves you. I think that some people have it in them, and they don't have to think about what their role is in the community. They don't have to think about it. It's just what you do. And I think there are other people who do it for show. And if that's the case, I don't care. As long as you do it. If you're doing it for show, okay, that's fine. If you're being bullied into it, fine. I don't care how you do it. I just wish more people would do it naturally. I just wish it would be the natural course of business. I do believe that if you look to your political leaders to make society better, you're looking in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Business has always been the culture. Business has always been the culture that if you want a better world, you need a better form of capitalism. Not socialism, not a different form. You need capitalism, but you need a kinder, gentler form of capitalism. And people, I think, consumers should be more critical of who they vote for with their dollars, and should hold these businesses to a higher standard. And if they're doing ESG for show, as long as they're doing it, maybe that's good enough. Maybe that's good enough. Maybe you have to bully them into it. Maybe that's good enough. But I would like to see more people just do it because it's just something they would naturally just do.
And I had a conversation this week. You make the points about an ESG marketing angle driving profits. It could just be the geographic area that I'm in, but I work with retail investors and I get relatively few questions about ESG strategies, ESG funds, ESG portfolios compared to the amount of marketing material I see. I see ESG marketing material probably once every single day from salespeople, from conference invites, and from webinar invites, economic update, ESG strategy, here's what we're doing, here's what we're seeing type things. And I probably get a question from a client once every other week, maybe once a month about ESG investing. It could just be the demographic of the area in which I live. but I don't even know that there's all that much of a widespread interest. It's certainly very interesting and very compelling to some people. And then, like you said, Mark, what are the standards by which ESG is getting measured? Some institutions go into a lot of detail with that, I think, but many don't, and just slap the sticker on it by way of marketing. In my opinion, I'm not seeing their revenues from this, but in my opinion, it's not even the best way to do marketing right now. I don't know that all that many people want to be doing it.
No, I agree. I think we're going to, wake up in a decade or so and look back on this and say, well, those were just buzzwords.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like in the 80s, Tom Peters' In Search of Excellence was the thing, right? And then 10 years later, you found out that most of those companies in search of excellence weren't that excellent to begin with. It was just the times. It just faded away, and then nobody talked about it anymore. I think it's just a buzzword now that I don't think really means anything. I don't make any investment decisions based on ESG. All I care about is if you deliver me returns, I'll take it from there. I'll figure out who I want to give to and what
Sure.
things I want to support. You have a skill of maximizing your profit. Go ahead and maximize your profit. That's fine. I'll turn it into something better. I'll turn it into something else. And there have been, theories in the market and theories in terms of business saying that a company should not concern itself with anything but the maximization of profit,
Right.
because the shareholder who will then take it from there. That if the shareholder wants to then contribute to this charity or that charity, they can, but the company doing it is dictating to all its employees what its values should be. That can sometimes be a dangerous thing. So if you have a company that is supporting a politician who is anti-Second Amendment, well, that could cost you a whole bunch of votes. It may get you some of these votes, but so I think that maybe they shouldn't have a voice in that kind of thing. I don't require that my customers, or I shouldn't call them customers, I rarely ever use that word, but any subscriber, I don't require that they have certain ESG standards.
Right.
I don't require that any of my suppliers have any ESG standards. I don't know if it's a thing that is, going back to the nature-nurture argument. If we say, can the environment that they're in create that, or is it natural within people? I would side to say it's just natural within people. I don't know that you can get an environment to do that. We're using a lot of ink on a lot of the pages in level 1, 2, and 3 to talk about ESG.
Yeah.
So I hope it becomes a thing. Otherwise, it really is a waste of ink and a waste of learning. But I don't use it in my investing one bit.
Right.
Not one.
So you're a compassionate capitalist, but it seems to me that sometimes in business you need to take a strict approach towards practices. And something that was going around on social media was copies, I think you posted, other people posted, copies of either your notes or video lessons that were getting distributed, outside of your control, stolen from you and resold. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on there?
Yeah, that is, that's not unique to me. That's been going on long before I showed up, and it's still going on. It is disappointing, to say the least, that when you try to, be as accessible as possible, people still feel the need to say, no, I want your stuff, but I'm certainly not going to give you anything for it. I'm going to give the criminal something for it. And, you have two groups out there. You have the career criminals. They've been doing this for years, to the point where they actually will get a hold of somebody's books. Kaplan is the most famous for this. And they'll go to a publisher and they'll have the books printed for themselves.
Wow.
Without giving Kaplan a single penny beyond buying the first edition, the first copy. They'll have them printed for themselves, and then they'll begin to sell them. And put the money in their pocket. These are people who lack any skill set and are generally unintelligent. And I say unintelligent because if they were intelligent, they'd be doing something else. They'd be in engineering, they'd be med school graduates, they'd be in law, they'd be somewhere else, but they're not. They're career criminals. From the career criminals, you get petty thieves. And a petty thief is somebody who will buy the stuff and then say, wait a minute now, I can put this on a Google Drive and I can start selling it too. So they're not a career criminal. They just decide that, hey, here's a way for me to line my pocket right now on the back of somebody else. And then you have the buyers. And the buyers, I think I'm the most disappointed in, because they decide that, you know, their integrity doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter, because they get to save a few dollars today. So they're not playing the long game, they're playing the short game. And, you know, we've all had people like this in our lives. People that you can't count on if you need something. They're the last people you would call, because they're only in it for themselves. The type of people where, don't ever say anything to this person, because they'll just blah, blah, blah all over the place. They have no character, they have no integrity and no morality. We've all known people like that, and we get rid of them. But this is what these buyers are doing when they line up to give money to the criminals and the petty thieves. Is they're saying, the cost of my morality, the cost of my integrity is $200, because they're paying $50 for my stuff, and they're financing the criminals. They won't give it to me. They won't give it to us. Of course not. But if you take our level 1 and you convert it to US dollars, it's about $240, $250, but they'd rather spend $50 with the criminal. So they've set a price on their integrity. Their integrity is $200. What they're saying is, for $200, fuck you. I'm going to do what's right for me. We don't want those people around us. Nobody wants those people around you. The kind of people who only do the right thing if it doesn't inconvenience them, will only do the right thing if it doesn't cost them anything. But the moment it costs them a penny, no.
Yeah.
That if you're stranded somewhere and you needed a ride, you know these are the last people you would ever call, because you know what the answer would be. The answer would be no, because it would be an inconvenience to them, and they're in it for them. They're not in it for anyone else. Warren Buffett has this great, you got to go back to 1999 to find this one, but it's online. And he's giving a speech to a school of students. And he's telling them that when they hire people, they look for 3 things: integrity, intelligence, and I forget what the third one was.
I watched it, and I clipped it onto a YouTube video. Integrity, intelligence, and
It was something else.
just drive or passion, I believe, work ethic.
His next line was the best line. He says, if you haven't got integrity, he says, forget it, because the other 2 things don't matter. And he says, in fact, if you don't have integrity, you don't want somebody intelligent. You want them as stupid as hell.
Yeah, he said dumb and lazy. You want them dumb and lazy.
Lazy, because then they won't do any harm. He says, but if they're intelligent and ambitious and they don't have integrity, you don't want these people around you. When you're buying from petty thief online or from one of these criminals, what you're saying is publicly, I don't have any integrity. In the finance industry, that's not going to work well for you. That's not going to work well for you at all. And you may think, well, who's ever going to know? Listen, 2 years ago, I put up a video called Fair Warning, where I said I was sick and tired of this, and we were going to make no distinction between buyers and sellers. They were all guilty in our eyes. Since that time, we've not let it alone. We haven't done much. Only in the last 3 months have we really been active. But we spent all that time creating aliases. We're in hundreds of study rooms. We're in on Telegram, on WhatsApp, on Facebook. We're in CFA study groups everywhere. So we built a whole bunch of aliases, and we infiltrated all of these study groups, and we started taking screenshots. It's amazing how stupid some people are. Now, the career criminals, they've spent their whole life being criminals. They're a lot harder to track. But the petty thieves, they don't know how to be a criminal. You know, a petty thief is someone who pulls up to a liquor store, gets out, runs inside, puts a mask on, sticks a gun in the person's face and says, give me all your money. Without knowing how many people are in the store, where the manager is, where the alarm system is, doesn't have a getaway driver, has his license plate sticking right out on his vehicle, didn't know to steal the vehicle first, didn't cover up his hands, and has a tattoo. A petty criminal, a petty thief, doesn't know how to be a criminal. So they leave footprints everywhere. Well, that's what these people do online. So they leave footprints everywhere. So we spent probably a year and a half just documenting. And in the last 3 months, we've decided now, let's do it now. And the first submission we made to CFAI had 56 names on it, of which they've been able to identify a number of their own people. That's the end of the line. We also know when we catch somebody selling our stuff, before we send you an email, we already know who you are. When we send you an email to tell you to stop, it's because we already know what the next step is going to be. There are consequences, and the only thing standing between us and those consequences is your response. If you say, yes, sir, done, it's off, it's gone. Well, that's not the end of it. We need you to do a few more things for us, and you're going to do it. But we get answers sometimes. You eat, go to hell. All right, off we go. We already know where you work. We already know where you went to school. We know who your friends are. We know who some of your family are because we connected on Facebook. We already know who you are. And yeah, we will reach out to your employer. Your employer is not going to take the chance. If you're selling IP, intellectual property, online that's not yours, your employer is not going to take the chance. We have two that we've done that to now. Two that we've separated from their job. We have a third one that in the process of getting to their employer, we uncovered a crime they committed. Not just selling our stuff, something else they did which broke international law. So this person, unfortunately, is either going to go to jail or be deported. But we can't be quiet about it. Now, listen, every business has this problem. Every single business has a problem with theft.
Sure.
Because it is part of, it's just for 5 to 10% of the population, it's always there. It's not confined to this particular socioeconomic class or to this level of income or to this region of the world. It's distributed. When you go buy a pair of jeans, in the price of that pair of jeans is theft. There'll be an extra $1.20 that you're paying or whatever it is because the company selling it says, look, people are going to steal from us and you're going to pay for it. Insurance, your insurance rates are higher than they should be because they know there's going to be insurance fraud. Everything you pay for has the price of bad people in it.
The corporations aren't going to take the haircut to their bottom line. They're going to charge more for what they're selling.
Good people always pay for the bad people.
Wow.
Now, we can do that too. We can say, well, we're losing X amount of subscribers, so it would translate to this much revenue that we're losing. So let's just raise our prices to cover it off. All we're doing is we're making good people pay for it. We're making people who are doing the right thing pay for it. I say, no, we're not going to raise our price. Rather than making good people pay for it, make the bad people pay for it, and pay they will. But we can't get to all of them. So the ones we do get to, unfortunately, will pay a disproportionate price. They will have unacceptable outcomes, way worse than what they did, because somebody's got to pay for it. And I'm not going to make good people pay for what bad people are doing.
So even while you're playing hardball, Mark, you're still being a compassionate capitalist because the people with integrity that are paying for your subscriptions, you're not making them pay for the criminals as well.
They won't pay. And listen, it's not as if we are dishing out consequences right away. We send you an email. You're going to stop doing what you're doing, and you're going to do these 3 things or these 4 things. If you comply, that's the end of it. That's the end of it.
Right.
If you don't, then like they say, release the Kraken.
Well,
we release the Kraken.
Who's doing all the digging? Are you doing it, or did you hire part of your team to do it, or do you have a?
We have a dedicated team on it.
Okay.
So it's not just something I do on the side. We hired people who do nothing but this all day long. We've established our relationships with Facebook, PayPal, Stripe. We've had a number of the career criminals kicked off of Facebook. We've had some of them kicked out of the study groups that they're in. We've had somebody deplatformed from PayPal. They can no longer take PayPal. And the career criminals are harder to get to. These are the bookstores that made a whole business of it. And I know with some of your listeners out there, eventually this is going to find its way to the bookstores. So let me give a very clear message to the bookstores that are out there. The only reason that you continue to exist is because we haven't put a price on you yet. You would be amazed at what some people are willing to do for money. Actually, you're probably not that amazed what some people will do for money. You do it every day. But one of your own employees for $10,000 would probably be more than willing to give us all the passwords, all the bank account numbers, the banks you use, the card processor you use, every bit of information that we would want to deplatform you everywhere. So the only reason that they continue to exist is because we haven't gotten to the point where we're going to put a price on them yet, but we will. So my strong suggestion to the career criminals is continue your criminal enterprise, but leave me the fuck out of it, because I will put a price on you. And sometimes when you put a price on someone, you can't control who the person is that wants to take advantage of that payment.
Sure.
And what they're willing to do. So,
well, when this isn't happening in the US or Canada, is there anything that local authorities can do for you, or is this sort of online security team you're using the best route?
oh no, we have options that we can follow. Unfortunately, in some countries of the world, the police turn a blind eye to this kind of stuff, or they're just as corrupt, or they're taking a payoff to ignore it. That you know, a bookstore can exist for 20, 30 years, reprinting not just Kaplan stuff, but Wiley stuff, CFAI's books. They did that for a long time, and that they can continue to exist. Now, these are large companies, so they can't cross certain boundaries. They have to do things by the book.
Yeah.
I don't have to do it by the book at all.
One of the advantages of being a small privately held company.
One of the advantages of being a small privately held company is it works both ways. If you think that I can't get to you because you're over there and I'm over here, same thing works for me. You can't get to me because I'm over here and you're over there. So if something bad happens to you over there, I'm just as protected as you are over there. So again, you know, I don't think I'm asking much here. I think my statement to the buyers is get some integrity, for God's sake, because it's going to matter. And if we do find you buying stuff, you're going to get an email from us. If you get an email from us, this is phase 2. In the new year, we're going after the buyers. If you get an email from us, it's because we already know who you are. And we're going to give you an opportunity to correct yourself. Get some integrity, because if you don't, if we do find you again buying or attempting to buy, then we won't have any mercy. We will simply go after your employer. Simple as that. Because you're showing yourself to be highly selfish and you have no integrity. There are 90% of candidates are good people with integrity.
Yeah.
So why would we want any job going to the 10% when there's the 90% that are more than qualified for it? I say let's push these people aside if they're going to continue to behave that way. But I would say this to everybody out there: if you are getting an email from us, it's because we already know who you are. We either saw your name online, or one of the people that we caught selling has given us your name as one of the buyers. Mm-hmm. We already know who you are already. Okay. So we'll move past that.
Yeah, let's shift gears a little bit then, Mark. I want to get to maybe something we debate on, and it could be a topic that in the future, if you're posting sort of political or socially related content on your channel, the income inequality or wealth inequality that exists in countries right now. You've said that, wealth inequality isn't driven by an inequality in income. And my counter to that was, it seems that it is. You have a lot of people who, and I think it starts early on because of a lack of education or the environment they came from. They never position themselves to be in a place where they can earn a livable wage. And I think there are a lot of people like that. You've said that, well, I'll let you take it from there. Do you think that income inequality causes wealth inequality?
You know, the wealth income or the wealth inequality problem is not, you can't boil it down to just one thing. But what we can do, instead of saying that it exists, is you can use a thought experiment to see if it would naturally exist even if you cured it. So let's say that there's you and I in a society, and we're both going to start with zero wealth. The government has confiscated everything and said, now we have pure equality.
Yeah.
And you're both going to make $100,000 regardless of what job you have, and that's it. You decide to spend everything that you make. I decide to save 50% of what I make, and I invest it. Well, let's say I invested at 5%. Well, going into next year, you have no wealth. I have 50,000 of wealth. You make 100,000. I make 102,500 because I get 5% off my 50,000. I've immediately created wealth inequality, and now we have income inequality. And I haven't done that because the system is broken. I've done that because we have free choice. So because we're free to choose, you made some bad choices. That much of wealth inequality over periods of 10, 20 years. Now, if you do this with somebody at 25 who lives a life of consumption to the time they're 45, and somebody else at 25 who lives a conservative life till they're 45, all of that money per year will compound to a significant difference at 45. The 45-year-old who spent everything that they make will have no wealth and will be living paycheck to paycheck. But you all started from the same point. If we want to get to a point where you don't have wealth inequality or income inequality, you must strip people of personal choice.
Sure.
I cannot allow you to make decisions that would be suboptimal. The state will make decisions on how much you consume and how much you save. And since I can't have you making bad investments, the state will be the only investment fund that exists. And since I can't have you buying depreciating assets with your consumption while the other person buys appreciating assets, I must dictate the basket of consumer goods that you will buy each year. The state apparatus you would need and the restrictions on freedom you would need to shut down inequality would be astronomical. So inequality is a natural outcome of freedom. It's a natural outcome of free choice. That it exists is not something that needs to be explained. That it exists is not something that needs to be cured. If it didn't exist, there'd be a problem. There would be a problem. Now, there's a belief that if you take a distribution, let's take the middle of a distribution, and you have tails in the distribution. The argument being put forth is that this tail of the distribution, the very wealthy tail, control way too much wealth, and this tail of the distribution simply doesn't have enough wealth. That's the big argument, that the disparity has never been greater. Okay, that there is wealth inequality should not be shocking.
Right.
If the disparity is really, really great, then we have to look at, well, what are the reasons? If you look at different countries in terms of the choices they have, that the citizens have, America truly is probably one of the freest countries on the planet in terms of the decisions you get to make in your life of what you want to do, when you want to do it, how you want to do it.
Definitely.
Well, the more freedom you have, the wider that distribution will become, and the higher the mean will be. So let's think about equities and bonds. Let's think about 30-day T-bills. What kind of variability does it have? It has a very, very tight distribution, but it has a mean that is left of the mean of equities. But equities has a very wide distribution. What happens, and this will happen in any society, when you decide to compact the tails of the distribution, let's take from the wealthy and let's bring this side of the distribution up. Take from the wealthy, bring this side. You will also shift the mean downwards. So you can expect that the average income, that's GDP divided by the population, the average income, if you attempt to shrink the distribution of wealth too much, average incomes will start to decrease to the point where you have no discrepancy in wealth. You will have a very poor nation.
Sure.
That's why socialism doesn't work. because only in socialism do you achieve true equality, when everybody is equally poor and equally miserable.
I agree with every premise of your example. And in the scenario with two people making $100,000, one person saving 50%, one person saving zero, which will always exist in a free society. One person is what I'll call being financially responsible. The other person is not. That's going to lead to wealth inequality. I also think, though, that there exists wealth inequality amongst two people who are as equally financially responsible. So consider a scenario where someone's making $100,000 and saves 20% of their income, and another person who makes $30,000, US dollars I'm talking, and saves 20% of their income. And because of the environment that that person grew up in, and they maybe had a lack of a mentor, I think when people don't have examples of opportunities, they don't see other people pursuing opportunities in their lives, and they didn't have an organization, say like Big Brothers Big Sisters, to give them a positive role model, they'll never take the steps to set themselves up to enter a scenario where they could earn an income, and they'll be stuck. And even if they become financially responsible at age 25, the scenario between those two examples is just going to widen because of the compounding returns of the person who earns a lot more money. So that to me seems like an issue where we have a portion of the population who isn't going to get to the point where they can earn an income to keep themselves close to equal in the amount of net wealth that they have.
Okay, so let's go back to what I said earlier with the U.S. being a good example. The U.S. is one of those countries where you will find the best of the best and the worst of the worst. That's the cost of having a wide distribution. That's the cost of freedom, is that you will get the best of the best and the worst of the worst. You can fix a lot of structural inequality at the cost of a narrower distribution. Now, if you look at things like innovation, which country produces the most innovation and has the most patents in the world? The U.S. by far.
Yeah.
By far has the most. If you look at where some of the top research universities are in the world, they're in the U.S. The U.S. has the best of the best. And again, the worst of the worst, but it has the best of the best because it allows for that wide distribution. If you narrow that distribution, you chop off the tails. You will chop off the tails.
Yeah.
So you can raise the bottom if your philosophy is we raise the bottom by lowering the top. And I find that liberals have this, when I say liberals, I don't mean it in a derogatory sense. I mean more liberal thinkers in terms of how you distribute in an economy.
Sure.
Have this idea that you create inequality by pushing from the top downwards to spread more of that out to the bottom. You will move output downwards, output in terms of all sorts of things, output in terms of innovation and creativity, because you will, at the margin, deter some people. Now, California is a good case in point.
Yeah.
How many people have left California for Texas?
I think it's a major logistics issue with U-Haul right now, because so many U-Haul vehicles are leaving California-based U-Haul facilities and going to Texas that U-Haul had to hire
people to bring them back,
to get them back, because it's like 2,000 families a day, I think.
Yeah. So this is a good case in point where a state has decided to go so far into the left that you will chase capital away, even from people who are liberal-minded. You will chase capital, and we don't live in the 1930s anymore. Some liberal thinkers like to say, well, look, the top tax rate in the 1930s was 90% and nobody left. Where were they going to go? Soviet Union?
Cuba?
I don't think so. South America?
Yeah.
I don't think so. China? India? There was nowhere to go. That's not the case today.
Right.
It's not the case today. So you can't look at something 30 years ago and say, well, money didn't leave. Well, half the world was communist. Where was it going to go? Money can leave now very quickly, and California is a good case in point. You lose one of those high income earners, you lose a significant tax base. So I would caution any any economy or any politician who would like to narrow a distribution, because you cannot narrow a distribution without moving the mean. You cannot take equities and make them less volatile, but still get the return on equities. Your return is gonna start approaching the return of bonds if you narrow the variability. Living in certain societies has opportunity and it has risk. The right tail of any distribution is opportunity. We don't really care about that. The left tail is risk. So when we talk about the risk of an investment, we're really talking about the left tail, losing money. The rest is opportunity. The US probably is the greatest place for opportunity, but also the greatest place for risk. If you're trying to limit the risk, you can't limit one side of a distribution. You will limit the other side of the distribution as well. So if you limit some of the risk, what you're saying is we're willing to limit some of the opportunity. That's not working out well for California.
Right.
Right. And that's on a state level. Now, yes, there are some people who, through no fault of their own, through circumstance or structural impediments, are in places where it is not as desirable or not as opportunistic as it could be. But we have already in place plenty of programs for that. We have plenty of philanthropy that happens in those particular areas. There is just a disagreement, I guess, on what role the state has to play in all of this. And I think that once the state starts determining that you should not have what you have because other people don't have it, I think that goes a step too far.
Yeah, that's fair. On the point, go ahead.
And if you are conservative with your finances for 20 years and somebody is profligate for 20 years, that was your money. At 45, you get to choose what you would like to do with that money. And if it's providing your child with a better future than you had, I don't see that as being privilege. I see that as merit. I see that you've earned the right to do that. It is a form of charity, except it's a very concentrated form of charity. Instead of helping out all these people, you're targeting your charity on one single person. What parent would not want to do that? I hate that term, oh, it's privilege. No, I don't have privilege. Most people I know don't have privilege. We have merit. There's a big difference between privilege and merit. And if I want to give all my money to one person, I should be able to, because I paid my dues on that money. I paid 53% to the state already. It's mine. This idea of confiscating 90% of your wealth when you die, I disagree with that.
I don't think that would fly anywhere in almost in the world. And if it was ever instituted, you'd just have people heavily avoiding it through whatever methods or loopholes would exist, or leaving the country quickly and having a domicile residence outside of the country, probably in the Mediterranean. It just would not be viable whatsoever. I'm with you there.
You'd have capital flight almost immediately.
Right.
On the point about, and I was going to ask you this later, but I thought of it while you were speaking, social systems and kind of the schools of thought that get structured around those. I want to ask about healthcare. And I've had this debate with friends of mine that I think the United States has the best healthcare system in the world. The common phrase around here is that the healthcare system is broken. I would say that it's 95% efficient and functioning very, very well, and that's evidenced by the quality and the types of procedures that you can get done now. The common counter argument, though, is that it's good here, it's better in Canada. We need a system like Canada. People can afford their health care. The number one example I hear is that the number one cause for bankruptcy in the United States is people who can't afford medical bills, which I think is accurate. And so we need a system like Canada where you don't incur the same out-of-pocket costs. And you're a Canadian resident, Mark, so what is your opinion on the healthcare system there and how it functions?
There's an old saying that says, if you want to know how much something costs, make it free. Because somebody somewhere has to pay for it. When it's free, it'll either be overused or it'll simply be undersupplied, one of the two. Let's separate those two things. Let's separate health care from healthcare system.
Okay.
I don't think the U.S. has a very good healthcare system, but it has probably some of the world's best health care. Most people of my stature, at least my financial
Sure.
stature, if something significant happens to us, we go to the U.S. in a heartbeat. If I felt that there was something significantly wrong with me, whether it be cancer or my heart or whatever, I'd be at the Cleveland Clinic like that, without hesitation, because I could get an appointment that very afternoon or tomorrow. I would, because it's for profit, I would be in. Here, I'd have to go to my doctor first if I can find a doctor. I've lived in St. Catharines now for 5 years, 6 years, still can't find a doctor because no one's taking any patients, because the healthcare system caps them at a certain amount of income, and that's it. So they have no motivation to take on any patients. You got to travel 100, 200 miles to get a doctor if you need primary care. If I felt that I needed this lump looked at, I have to go to my doctor, who then sends me to a specialist. Well, it could be 6, 7 months before I get in to see a specialist, because there simply aren't that many of them. Because again, income is capped. Once you get to the specialist, he says, well, we're going to have to get an MRI. Well, you got to find a hospital that has an MRI, and you got to get an appointment, which might be 9 months to a year to get an appointment, because society has to pay for it. There's no profit motive in it. So you don't have all these extra MRI machines lying around. So by the time I'm diagnosed, the oncologist then says, if we only would have caught it 6 months sooner. That's the problem with the Canadian healthcare system. Now, having cancer in Canada is just the same as having it in the US.
Right.
The health care you receive is top notch. It's good if you get it. If you get it, that's the problem. If I go to the emergency room with a cut on my hand, well, first thing, if I had a cut on my hand that needed stitches, I would just resign myself to the fact that I'm going to live with a scar. Because if I went to the emergency room to have it taken care of, the wound would heal before I actually got in. It would be a 12 to 14-hour wait before they saw it. Your wound would heal before you got in to get your stitches. So in the US, though, you just walk in and pay, and you can get it taken care of very quickly, because it is for profit. So there is a motivation to be customer oriented. Here, you're not a customer.
And I think
you're just a user of the system.
The fact that healthcare costs money, which under most insurance coverages, the majority of your healthcare costs would be, if you had major healthcare costs, would be covered by the health insurance. But the fact that healthcare costs money, I think, is a perfectly fine thing. And there's an argument that healthcare is a basic human right and it needs to be free. And I say, well, or it's a necessity, and so it becomes a basic human right and should be free. And so I would just point towards food and grocery stores and farmers and say, isn't food a necessity? Obviously it is. Well, does that make food a basic human right? Should it be free? And so the government needs to subsidize farmers, and everything you pick up at a grocery store should be free. That's nonsense. No, because
that's an interesting argument. I never heard that counter argument that food and water.
It's a necessity.
Should not be free. Listen, healthcare is not going to be free, even if you get it. Even if you get it for free, it wasn't free.
Right.
It had to be paid for, which means you may not be paying the bill at the counter, but you're paying it in your taxes. So what we have is, when you have socialized healthcare, is you have everyone paying into the system, whether they use it or not. That's the whole idea behind insurance, right? So we should say, well, that's just another form of insurance. In the US, everybody pays, for the most part, you pay for your own health care, unless, of course, you fall in certain income brackets. Then you have Medicare, Medicaid, things like that. I think the difference in the US is, even though you have the best health care in the world, you have some of the worst health outcomes in the world. That's a curiosity. Type 2 diabetes.
Oh, yeah.
US is the leader in type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
Obesity. US is the leader in obesity. It is, I think, the big problem in the US is the sheer amount of corporations that control your food supply.
Yeah.
And the amount of unhealthy food that is available, I think, is the biggest problem in the US. Is just, you have terrible health outcomes, but great health care. Now, the argument is, yeah, but most of those people can't afford the health care anyways, which is why they have terrible health outcomes. Well, in Canada, everybody has access to this healthcare system, uh, but we don't have the level of type 2 diabetes that America has.
Yeah.
That's not a result of our healthcare system. It's just you never end up in the healthcare system with diabetes to begin with. So there's something that is an input to bad health outcomes happening in the US that's not happening anywhere else, or that's happening minimally everywhere else. And I think it has a lot to do with the food, a lot to do with accessibility of getting good food.
Okay.
And I think way too many corporations controlling way too much of the food processing, and I think kind of bad outcomes. In Canada, for example, we have certain grades of foods that could never that are sold in the U.S. that would never ever get past certification here.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
that meat standards are significantly higher in Canada than they are in the U.S. Same with chicken, dairy. Most dairy, the standards are significantly higher. There's a lot more standards, consumer protection standards around food in Canada than there is in the U.S.
I
But
didn't know that.
again, now you bring in the argument about freedom. I'm not free to choose when the government says these are the only things you can buy. So it restricts my freedom
Yeah.
to some degree, but it also reduces the negative outcomes. Whereas in the US, you're free to eat whatever you want, but you have to live with the far left tail of the negative outcomes that come with it. So you can you can start dictating the types of food that people can buy at stores, but you would restrict some of their freedoms. You would bring both tails of that distribution inward.
Right. So it's maybe the opposite of something like the tobacco industry, where it's still obviously available, just with huge taxes and huge disclosures on the health problems with it. Rather, they're just saying no, it's not going to be an option for you.
Well, yeah, here in Canada, it's the to buy a pack of cigarettes, you pretty much got to know exactly what you're looking for and where to get them. I mean, they're not visible in any stores. They're hidden behind curtains. You can't even see them anymore. You can't have any kind of colorful boxes anymore. You have to have pictures on them of all the bad things that can happen to you. Like, I mean, it's pretty brutal if you want to be a smoker in Canada.
So one other, maybe the last liberal thinking type economic topic I want to ask you about is, it seems to me that there will have to be some type of universal basic income system or minimum government paid income in the United States in 10 or 20 years from now. We quickly sort of talked about the trucking industry. Tesla's making an electric semi. There are probably others as well. Many simple labor type jobs and some simple analytical type jobs or just computer jobs probably will be replaced by the advancement of technology. And I don't know that we'll be able to create an economy where as many jobs can be created by the amount that will be replaced. So it seems like you'd have way too many people on the street to me, and you'd get to the point where you have to pay them some type of income to prevent widespread suffering. Do you think that's a probability, and what do you think about that structure?
Yeah, if you look at all the social programs, and I'll take Canada as an example, all the social programs we have already, um, the argument is that MBI would replace all those social programs so that rather than you getting, housing, subsidized housing here, and you're getting welfare over here, and you're getting this and that, all that disappears, and all these people now get a basic minimum income.
Okay.
That it ends up being the same dollars, except now that you are taking a certain amount of uncertainty away. So there is an argument for it that it's not extra spending; it's just different spending. That if you're going to introduce that, you would eliminate all of these food stamps. You would eliminate a whole bunch of other things as well. I don't know that I like the idea of giving people money. just because they're in a bad position. That's not going to solve anything. It's, as that old saying says, you're giving somebody a fish. Well, next day you got to give them another fish, and then another fish, and another fish, until you actually just teach them how to fish.
Right.
So, for these jobs that are disappearing, I think that if you are willing to go to, it doesn't have to be university, any technical school, any retraining, any co-op program, any apprenticeship, anything like that, that it should be free. And yes, maybe then you qualify for this basic minimum income. But you cannot just sit at home watching TV and collecting taxpayer dollars.
Right.
If the taxpayer is going to step in and say, okay, you're in a bad situation, let us help you out. You don't get to just say, thank you, and kick back and relax and say, cash for life, I'm good. All I need is my Netflix and my one-bedroom apartment. That's all I need, and the taxpayer will take care of it forever. There has to be some way out. It cannot be a lifestyle choice, because if we're going to finance your lifestyle choice, why not finance my lifestyle choice? Why not finance everybody's lifestyle choice?
And that scenario you described, I think, would be detrimental to a society, even if only in terms of mental health, because I believe innately human beings need to be progressing in some way or working towards something to be fulfilled. And if you had 50 million or 100 million people 20 years from now getting paid to watch Netflix and sit at home, I think we'd see depression, anxiety, mental health issues through the roof. Maybe everyone could have an opportunity to become a psychologist then, because that career would be in such demand at that point. But it wouldn't mean good things for people as a whole.
No, I don't. I'm not against basic minimum income if there is a contract in place.
Yeah.
We will give you this and you will do that, because it will make you self-sufficient at some point, so you no longer need this. I get that welfare is not enough for somebody to not work and go back to school. I get that that's not enough. I really do. So we'll pay for your school. We'll pay for it. The taxpayer will pay for it. Not a problem. And we'll give you income to live on every single month. As long as you're doing your end of the contract, we'll live up to our end of the contract, because at the end of the contract, you become a contributor to society through taxes, which then pays it backwards for the next person who's going through. I fully agree with that. I'm all on board with having some kind of contractual relationship that says, you want to do better, we want to see you do better.
Yeah.
But I'm absolutely against somebody who says, I don't want to do anything and I want you to pay for it. I mean, I'm socially liberal, but I'm fiscally conservative. That to me just seems like somebody moving into your basement saying, I'm never going to clean up, I'm never going to do the dishes, but I want you to cook for me and serve me all day long. Don't think so. Think so. Next for anybody listening, next time you think the government should do something, the government should pay basic minimum income, the government should provide health care, the government should provide paid daycare, I want you to just strike the word government out of that and put the word taxpayer. The taxpayer should pay for my child's daycare. That doesn't sound logical now, does it? The taxpayer should pay for my father's long-term care. The taxpayer should pay for this for me. The taxpayer should pay for that for me. That doesn't sound logical. It's easy to hide behind this shadowy government term. The government should pay for this. The government should pay for that. Yeah. The government pays for nothing. The taxpayer pays 100% of everything. 100% of everything. So you can have anything. I liken it to this. You can come to dinner and have anything on the menu you want, as long as you're willing to pay the bill at the end. So you can have anything you want as long as you're willing to pay the bill. And if you're not, then that's the end of it. I think that everybody is free to pursue whatever lifestyle they want. Just don't send me the bill. Because if I'm financing your lifestyle, I should then have a say in your lifestyle.
Sure.
If I have to pay for people's kids' daycare, I should then have a say in how many kids you can have.
Otherwise, the population could theoretically run you dry of resources by continuing to.
Well, it's not just that. It's just that you can't tax some people and give them the responsibility of paying for things without having a voice. No taxation without representation.
Representation.
Wasn't that the big
Yeah.
cry that started the American Revolution? Well, I still believe that. No taxation without representation. If you want me to pay for something, I should have a say in how you conduct yourself. Here's a good example. In Canada, at least in Ontario, let's say you were going to go buy a bottle of vodka, a typical 750 ml bottle of vodka, or 26 ounces. It's going to be about, I think, 35, 40 bucks, because there's a huge amount of tax in there for the government, because they know it has negative healthcare outcomes. But if you're in Florida, it's 10 bucks. Same bottle's 10 bucks. If you're going to be an alcoholic, I don't think there's a cheaper state to be in than Florida.
Oh.
Because suddenly it's easy, it's cheap to have that addiction. But because it's not in there, there is no, when the individual gets some kind of negative health outcomes because of too much alcohol, well, how can it be the taxpayer's problem? The taxpayer collected nothing for it.
Yeah.
It is your choice, and purely your choice. But here, because we know that people will drink, we make them pay more in tax to drink than an otherwise other person would pay, simply because we know it has negative outcomes. Same with cigarettes. Since it has negative health outcomes, they end up paying more. So we can tax your free choice as opposed to restrict your free choice.
Mark, what kind of things do you do for fun right now outside of running the business? Anything?
What do I do for fun? Well, I recently lost my dog a while back.
Yeah.
I used to really enjoy going through the neighborhood with him, and we didn't really walk far because he was a senior dog. He would walk a couple of blocks, and then he'd just lay down on the, by the side of the sidewalk on someone's lawn, and would just stand there. And, as people came by, we would talk to people. That was enjoyable, but I don't have that anymore. So now, I don't know. I find that there is that big hole in my day.
Okay.
Where it's a matter of, what do I do for fun? I'm really just rediscovering, myself, because he was with me for so long. Suddenly he's gone, and it's an empty house, and you realize, all I've done was work. How empty my life is at this point. Nothing really. I find that what I do is its own fun. I really don't, look forward to the weekends. Like some people,
Yeah.
Thank God it's Friday. I never say that, because to me, every day is the same day. Every day is a weekend day for me. When you enjoy what you're doing, it's not really a big deal. So I do what I do for fun. Probably my greatest joy comes with the market.
Yeah, I know you mentioned trading was a.
Sunday night, I spend a couple hours just thinking about what's going on, what happened over the weekend. And I don't try to predict. I just say, if this happens, here's what I'm going to do. If this happens, this is what I'm going to do. So on Monday, if we sell off, I have particular strategies that I'm going to use.
Okay.
If on Monday we rally, I have particular strategies that I'm going to use. And I have particular securities that I'll use, particular types of trading strategies I'll put in play, currencies that I'm watching, that I'm thinking are probably a lot weaker than they should be right now, because I can't explain the US dollar strength. There it is.
Yeah.
I honestly can't explain it, but there it is, right? But because I can't explain it, I've always felt very comfortable that if there's something I can't explain very well, it's only a matter of time. So I think there's only a matter of time before I see significant US dollar weakness. I just don't know when it's going to come. But I think as we move past the 15th, which is the central bank meeting, I think once we move past the 15th and other central banks come into focus, and that there is more than one central bank in the world other than the Fed, we sometimes forget that I think other currencies will start to get bid up, because other central banks will start to say, well, we have interest rate increases on our horizon as well, and they'll be faster than what the US is going to do. And I think you'll see a reversal in the US dollar when we see that, hey, did you know there are other countries with other central banks?
Yeah.
All right. So once we get past the 15th, things will be a little bit better. End of year is usually not very exciting in the markets. Usually you end up drifting in the direction that got you here. So I do expect into the end of the year that we would probably drift a little higher. So I have strategies for that. But if we drift lower, I have strategies for that. That to me is fun, is thinking it through, thinking of all the possibilities and finding a trade that works no matter what happens. Positioning yourself such that if we go up, great. If we go down, great. I'm good either way. So
How,
there's my one.
how was your trading account done in 2021?
Uh, um, let's try to find a nice word for this. Obscenely good.
Okay.
Obscenely good. Which is, it fits in that narrative of the rich only got richer, which is, a democratic, or you can call it a liberal lie. It's not that the rich got richer. It's that the experienced got richer. If you're experienced in the market, when you have central bankers and politicians doing what they've done for the last year, it's a no-brainer. It's not hard to position yourself to scoop up most of the money that they're spitting out there. You have a central bank that's continuing its asset purchases every single month and reiterating that it's there to support asset prices. It's going to keep rates low for an extended period of time. Why else would you budge out of
Right.
equities? You have the Biden administration that cannot spend enough money. It simply can't spend enough money. Well, okay, bad for the economy, maybe bad for the long-term health of the economy, bad for government debt and deficits, but absolutely great for investors, absolutely great for markets. It's experienced people who have made the money, but is that so shocking? If I take 50 people and 45 of them are billionaires, and 5 of them are wilderness experts
Okay.
who know how to survive in the wilderness, and I drop 50 of them in the middle of nowhere. Who's going to be the longest ones
Sure.
surviving?
The experienced. Yeah.
The experienced ones. The money wouldn't matter. So it's not as if rich people will always win. It's just you're putting them in an environment that they know. They are wilderness survivors when it comes to the market. Of course they're going to thrive. Of course they're going to win. Experience always wins. And the rich simply just have far more experienced advisors. They're not on Robinhood doing their own trading
Right.
and slowly losing money month after month after month, which is what most day traders do. They're called day faders. That most retail traders in 6 months are broke based on the money they start with. Most are broke. 95% are broke. Very few actually can survive longer than that. What made my year as good as it was I had experience. So when you talk about 40% returns, if I had $10,000, I would have made $4,000.
Right.
That's a great return. How did you do? 40%. Well, just because I had more doesn't somehow make me greedy. It's still the same 40%. It's a measure of my experience, not a measure of my greed. But it's something that gets votes, right?
Well, I
The
think-
rich just got richer in the pandemic. No, the rich didn't get richer. The experience got richer, but you bloody well set up the chessboard for us. You gave us no choice but to win. It's your own fault. It's not our fault.
I can support your
I can support
experienced
your
getting
experience
richer rather than the rich getting richer argument, with some firsthand examples of rich people who didn't have the risk appetite to do what it may have taken over the past couple of years to see the returns that you're mentioning. People invested with the majority of their portfolio in the bond markets, especially treasuries, have not gotten richer. Rich people have not gotten richer over the past 2 years if they're not invested the right way. So the experienced got richer, those situated correctly got richer, I think is a better way to say it.
Well, that is a much better way to say it. A lot of businesses took a hit on their sales. So,
Right.
especially a lot of wealthy small business owners did not get richer in the pandemic. It's a nice, convenient lie that politicians like to tell. And this lie, pretty much, whenever they're demonizing the rich, it always seems to come from the left. These are nice little slogans, as you said before, things that people can repeat. The rich got richer. Well, then they must have done something wrong. There must be some structural inefficiency in the system that's broken and needs to be fixed. Well, the rich didn't do anything greedy. You set the game up for us.
And they happen to be the more experienced people which just makes sense naturally, right?
That's exactly it. They just happen to be the more experienced people, and they were going to get richer no matter what environment you gave them.
Right.
So are the rich going to get richer over the next 2 years? Yeah. Yeah. That's what money gets. Money begets money. Even if you only get 2% return and you go really, really conservative like anybody can do, the rich will just get richer. That's the whole snowball effect. That's the whole compounding effect. That's what I think more 25-year-olds need to learn right now. That every $5 latte that you buy is asking your future retired self for 128 bucks.
Right.
Think about it that way. You're spending 128 bucks for that Starbucks coffee. Every day that you go to work, you're spending 128 future dollars on that $5 coffee today because you don't understand that snowball effect, that compounding effect. You want to have a great life when you're 50? It does require you to make certain decisions now about how you spend your money. Most people live paycheck to paycheck, not because they don't have an income, it's because they suck with money. They don't understand the difference between an appreciating asset and a depreciating asset. They don't understand the difference between a $5 investment versus $5 consumption today. And they can't look out 5, 10, 15, 20 years and see the difference. Is your life going to be any different if you don't have that Starbucks coffee today? No. In 20 years, are you going to look back and say, oh, that Starbucks coffee, I still remember it? No. So, it's bad decisions, it's poor decisions that lead to these, over time, compounded effects that lead to these negative outcomes over a long period of time.
And the ramifications of those decisions, the outcomes that will, be the reality in the future, I think is going to become more of a problem for those making the bad decisions. I'm thinking of in the United States, because specifically of two things. Many companies are no longer offering pensions. There's no more forced retirement from your income throughout your working years. And the Social Security fund is probably going to be changing when or how much they make their distributions at some point down the line. So there's going to be less either capitalist forced or societal forced savings for all these people. And I think it's going to create a further division. You're going to have a lot of 82-year-olds working at Taco Bell 50 years from now because there's just not going to be any income or a very small income for them to be deriving if they didn't start saving earlier. And schools don't teach people to do this thing. So I see my role as important in society to try to help offer some education or encourage people to make responsible financial decisions. Now, from a business perspective, there isn't a lot of money in telling people, hey, you should start putting away $50 a month for the first time ever and do that nonstop for 40 years. But 401k plans are a good example of that. So getting in front of a company and telling 100 people, hey, just starting this up could be the single greatest financial decision you ever make in your life. Putting this in an index fund and never changing it could be the best decision you ever make. And so I hope that I'm able to have that type of an impact. I can't say that I wake up every day and am able to make that change, but yeah, it's going to be difficult for people down the road because they're not going to have the pension or Social Security that retirees, 20 years ago did.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think today the cost of bad decisions is probably greater than the cost of a bad decision 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think the cost of bad decisions will only increase. And I think we do everybody an injustice by stripping people of personal responsibility and blaming all negative outcomes on the system, a system that creates incredible wealth, that creates incredible social mobility, that creates incredible innovation, a system that's never been seen before in the history of the world in terms of the potential that you can be. To continually blame a good system and strip all people of personal responsibility. Sometimes you are where you are because of a series of bad decisions that you yourself made,
right,
in against all the good advice that you had against it. You still made these decisions. You don't get to blame the system. And unfortunately, I'd say that's probably 80 to 90% of people in bad situations can point to their own, really have to own it. That it's far more about personal responsibility than blaming the system. Yes, the system has some problems. The system will always have problems. In 30 years, the system will have problems. They'll just be different problems.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at the best system to have in terms of which system has the least amount of problems, Western style capitalism wins by a landslide. And I think that too many young people are so disillusioned by it that they think that let's throw it all away and let's bring in socialism, which throughout history has never, ever worked out well for any country that's ever done it, ever. But yet there's huge examples of capitalism bringing billions of people out of poverty.
Yeah.
Is it perfect? No. But no human is perfect. So why would you expect any human-made system to be perfect?
That's a good point.
Right. Its perfection lies very much in its imperfection. So, it is folly to expect that much precision out of an imprecise population. You do the best that you can, and then you have good people who step in places to pick up, like we do. We support Jillian's Place, which is a place where women in abusive relationships can go to get away from it. So we support that. That's something that maybe some people made some bad decisions and ended up there. Maybe they didn't make bad decisions, and it's something external to them. But that's where our role comes in, to step in and say, let's do these things. And we need more people to start thinking that way. You want to solve the world's problems? Clean up your own house. Fix your own house. And you become an example for those around you. And that example becomes contagious. You become this challenging person where those around you say, I don't measure up to this. It challenges them to be a better person. Rather than pointing your finger at people saying, you don't measure up, you don't measure up, you don't measure up. You have a history of this. Your people have a history of that, this, that. All of the injustices throughout history are on your shoulder. Where's that going to get you? Where's that? You know what? Clean up your own house, because no human is perfect. Start with yourself. And if everyone did that, you would eventually end up with a better world. But this idea of pointing other people, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you haven't done enough. Well, what have you done? I find that so many people are super, super generous when it comes to spending other people's money and spending other people's time, but they won't do a damn thing. But I've called some people out today for not doing enough. So I've done my part to make the world a better place, haven't I? No, you are part of the problem. Clean up your own house. If everyone did that, looked inwards and decided that they were going to be the best version of themselves that they could be, it's contagious, because those around you then want to be the best version of themselves that they can be. And if you do that, if you follow that, you will get lucky in life, because luck is when opportunity and preparation meet. And opportunity is everywhere. So if you're not getting lucky in life, it's because you've done nothing to prepare for it. Kind of harsh, right?
Yeah. Reality can be harsh.
Yeah.
Have you been or will you be buying any cryptocurrencies?
No. I don't see crypto as an asset class. I don't see, first of all, the idea of calling it a currency, I think, is ridiculous. I don't really actually see, other than little bits here and there, I don't actually see anybody using it as a currency.
Right.
The vast majority, 95% of the money in cryptocurrency goes in the hopes that it goes higher so they can take out conventional money and spend conventional money. So that's why it's more appropriately referred to as an asset class instead of a currency. I don't think that if I look into the future and say, well, will there be cryptocurrencies? I believe there will be. I believe physical money is on its way out, and I think 20 years now I've been thinking, what's the point of physical money? I can't remember the last time I ever had a $20 bill in my pocket.
Yeah.
I carry no cash. I have no cash. Everything is debit. I can't remember the time I actually reached in my pocket and counted out money to pay for something. It was 20, 30 years ago. I don't know why in an economy we need cash. Cash is, I think, primarily used, I shouldn't say primarily, I'm going to say as we move forward, cash will be used primarily for illegal
Sure.
activities.
Yeah.
That if you got rid of cash, you could probably clean up a lot of crime where cash is involved, because somehow now you've got to pay for it legitimately. So if you're going to your heroin dealer, you can't hand him $20 cash. You got to bring him a bag of groceries. Well, at least there was some sales tax or some kind of GDP associated with it. He's got a shopping list of the things that he wants that you have to deliver to him. You'd get rid of a huge black market economy. I see no reason for cash. So will there be cryptocurrencies in the future? Yes, but they'll be central bank currencies. They won't be privately owned currencies, because I can't trust that those are actually going to be stores of value. The volatility in these cryptocurrencies right now disqualify it as a currency.
Okay, that's fair.
We disqualify it as a currency. Maybe it's an asset class, but it is a speculative asset class, highly speculative asset class. It has volatility that I don't need. I mean, it can go up and it can go down. I don't need that. I can do a lot better. Give me a very large cap stock that's liquid with liquid options. I can do just as good with a lot of safety and sleep well at night. I don't need to play that game.
One of the things you said, and yeah, I'm probably on board with about 90% of that. It's not a currency. It's an extremely speculative investment right now. The deviation on these things are crazy. I think most people are buying them just in the hopes of seeing it go up and then taking their US dollars right back out of their investment. But I think, and I don't own cryptos. I'm not too much involved in the crypto spaces. From what I see on Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube, I think there is an increasing population of people who are starting to buy it for the long term in the hopes of it becoming a viable currency. And I don't know that it will. I totally think that we will see many transactions handled digitally and with digital currencies. And I'm not sure if I think that could be Bitcoin or a different existing cryptocurrency or a government-owned currency. But I do think there's increased activity in people buying these things because they think it will be the most economically viable way to exchange value. And so the more of that type of activity, and I think that that type of investing will increase, and the amount of speculative buy-in and take money back out a week later will decrease. And if that's true, then we could see the standard deviation of these things start to decrease. And then at some point in the future, if they ever started to become widely used for transactions, it could sort of change in the type of asset that it is. But right now, it's like a gamble. It's like a gamble, I think.
Okay, well, let's say that we go with that. Let's say that we buy into that story. Okay, right now it's an asset class, but this will become mainstream. It will become a currency. Okay, let's say we buy into that argument. What makes us think it will be at this value? I mean, it could be all of what you said could be absolutely true, but at a much lower value. So I would rather wait and see. Now, the counter argument is there's only so many Bitcoins. Yeah, but there's only so many Ethereum. There's only so many Dogecoin. There's only so many this, so many that.
Scarcity,
that,
right.
There's an unlimited amount of limited currencies that can be printed. And if central banks get in on it, there's an unlimited amount of limited currency. It will become mainstream. We will pay in cryptocurrency. We will, but who says it's going to be at these values?
Right.
So your argument could be true, and that investment thesis could be true, but that argument is conflating the current value with the future acceptability of it.
Right.
You could get future acceptability at a much lower valuation.
Yeah, so if every transaction on the planet happened in Bitcoin 20 years from now, then the price would be higher than it's at today. But I've even heard cryptocurrency people very involved in that space, say that they think Bitcoin will sort of go away just as some of the early internet providers went away. and new names will emerge, and those will be the staples of digital transactions. And so in that scenario, then the value of Bitcoin today is absolutely nonsense because it'll be worth zero in the future. So yeah, to make a claim that you're investing in it for the purposes of its use as a currency later on would have to mean that you are confident enough that that specific crypto that you're buying is the one that's going to win out into the future. And so even that in and of itself is not a certainty.
And at a higher compounded valuation than you could get by being in equities over the next 15 years while it happens.
Right.
It's not a matter of preserving its value now. It must grow at least the rate of growth of equities over the next 15 years, because that's probably how long it would take, and that it would still be standing, and it would have at least that valuation, and it would be mainstream. You're asking me to accept a lot. There's a lot I can do in the interim. There's a lot I can do in the middle. That's asking me to accept a lot from something unproven. Now, maybe I just don't have the vision to see that far. But listen, does somebody have the vision, or are they just in one part of the distribution? So we have cryptocurrencies, and you have just as many people on the left or the right saying it will survive, it won't survive. One camp is going to be right. Does that mean that they had vision? Or if you have two people saying the opposite thing, one is going to be right. That just doesn't mean anything more than, well, one camp was going to be right anyways. I don't know what's going to happen. But that's the point. I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay, that's fair.
Well, that's not a trade that I want to be in.
Yeah.
Right? I want to be in a trade where if it does this, I'm good. If it does this, I'm good. I have all of these exit points, and there's many different things that I can do at the same time. Here, I can only buy and hope it goes up. It doesn't pay a dividend. There's an opportunity cost to holding it. If it goes down, I can either take the loss or hope that it goes back up in the future. And that's all I have is hope. If I'm in GM and it goes down, it has liquid options. There's so much I can do to hedge out, to lower my cost, to generate an extra dividend. Even if GM doesn't pay a dividend, I can generate my own dividend.
Sure, with options.
I don't have that ability with these cryptocurrencies. It's a binary trade, in and out. I don't like that.
Anything else you want to cover? Anything else you'd like to put out there for this for the purposes of this interview?
Well, one of the things, and I think it's an important point to cover, because you're a charter holder working in the industry now, so you may have opinions on this as well. Being on the other side of the exams is what we've been seeing in the pass rates in the exams, and with I think you're getting a lot of negative sentiment towards the value of the process, the value of the charter at this point in time. I'm seeing more and more of it, like the charter is not going to be worth it. Get the CPA. Automation is going to replace everybody anyways. What's the point? It's a waste of time. You're seeing more and more of that, especially with these lower and lower pass rates, because who knows? There's a lot of theories about why the pass rates are low, and we've heard CFAI's theory about why it's low, and I think you and I are on the same page on this. That maybe it's a variable, but it's not. It's R squared. I think is rather low.
Right.
I don't think that it explains the whole story. I think there's a bigger story here. But in terms of the value of the charter, and the last video I did talked about it in terms of the limited research that's available out there in terms of what the charter does do for you. And the conclusion is it does get you access to jobs that you otherwise might not have gotten. But in getting those jobs, you're paid no more than somebody who doesn't have the charter. And the charter is only worth it if it makes you better at your job. If it doesn't make you better at your job, then no, it was not worth it. As far as the long-term viability of the charter versus CPA, which it seems to be compared to, I mean, if you're going to reduce charter holders to analysts that are reading nothing but financial statements, okay, I'll give the edge to the CPA on that one.
Balance sheets and
because not only can they understand what's going on the statements, they have a deeper understanding of the transactions behind it that made that stuff came about. I'll give it to them. I'll give the edge to them on that one, especially if they want to spot something that is odd. I would definitely give the edge to the CPA. But most CPAs have a very poor understanding of economics. Most CPAs aren't asset managers in the least.
Yeah, trading and portfolio management. No.
Yeah. So you're bringing all of level 1, 2, 3 down to FRA. When you start saying that CPA is the way to go, you're bringing it down to just FRA. The charter is so much broader. You have two sides. You have the analyst side, and you have the asset management side. In my opinion, the asset management side is the far sexier side of the industry than the analyst side. But usually, you'll work your way up through analysis first before you actually are in a position to manage assets, or at least until you've proven yourself to be able to manage assets. But it's the far sexier side of the industry. So I don't know that CPA can get to that level, or that it would be recognized. Oh, you have a CPA. Here's a portfolio. You've been an accountant for 20 years. You should be able to manage assets. That I don't see those kind of moves happening in organizations where the CFO heads down into accounting and says, "Who's your best accountant? We have a small cap portfolio that needs managing."
Right.
I don't see that happening. So I don't think that the charter itself is under any kind of long-term threat.
No.
I think what it's seeing right now is short-term volatility as it finds its new home in computer-based testing, as it finds the perfect mix of the types of questions to have on the exam, as it readjusts its curriculum to be more in line with a shorter exam, with a smaller exam. These are growing pains. These are transition pains. And with that, you're also seeing volatility in sentiment that I think will go away over time. That those that hold the course, I think, will be I think, rewarded quite well with this, because it still is a difficult designation to get, as it should be. I mean, if anybody and everybody can get it, what would be the value? Right? There should be some scarcity in it, because that's how it has value. People who love cryptocurrency love it because there's scarcity. Well, then you should love this.
Right.
I mean, what better appreciating asset to invest in than this, if it has scarcity over time?
Yeah.
I'm not concerned about the future viability of the charter. I'm not concerned about the future value of it as a designation, or as a signaling advice to employers that there is value behind this.
And I think more and more that I work in wealth management, portfolio management, and see others who also work in portfolio management that do and don't have the CFA charter. Potentially one of the biggest real world increases in value from the material throughout the three levels comes from behavioral finance in level 3, in my opinion. And when you mentioned, Mark, if you have a CPA, manage a small cap fund, the CPA is more valuable than the CFA for analyzing changes in a company's balance sheet. And I do think that's an important factor in coming to a valuation in a stock price. If you're using a discounted cash flow model or something of that nature, you're going to have to make some projections, and that requires other analytical thinking. But my point is that behavioral finance, and thinking about cognitive or other biases that you may have, and then literally understanding, like if you've studied for level 3, you'll know the CFA text prescribes in some cases exactly how to approach your thinking once you know that you or a client of yours, an investor that you're working with, is subject to some bias. To best overcome that bias, if you can prevent someone from making a bad financial decision early on, it doesn't matter if you're earning another half a percent or 100 basis points every year forever. Overcoming one terrible decision at the beginning of, or at any point in an investor's life cycle is very beneficial. So I would even just point to behavioral bias. I said trading and portfolio management, but there's a lot of content in the CFA exams that's going to allow it to remain useful for investors and analysts all over the globe. And then I'll go back to what I've always called the number one benefit of the CFA charter, in my opinion, and it's a selfish one, which is that it provides future career opportunities that otherwise may not exist if you didn't have the CFA charter. And
I think it probably carries the most weight to other charter holders.
And maybe the second most to other people who are very involved in the finance industry but may not have the charter themselves. Those are usually the people that are at some of the companies or may be making promotion decisions, right? So having the charter can be beneficial for your career prospects as well, far more so than the CPA would. So definitely agree that it's valuable into the future. And I wonder if there's a scenario where the CFA Institute tries to work with other institutions or organizations to make the charter become more of a standard, a minimum standard by which someone, like sort of like the licenses are in the United States, securities licenses to legally make investment recommendations to anyone. If that was the case, the demand would certainly increase for the charter, and the value of its future use would also be, I don't know if that's a likely outcome or not, but it would only increase the value of it. Do you think there's a scenario where certain roles or positions require it?
I don't know that it would that it would get to that point where it would be the requirement. I know in Canada, if you have your CFA level 1 behind you, you have your, I think it's Canadian Securities Course level 1 behind you as well.
Oh,
You automatically get that, and you need the CSC. The CSC is a regulatory requirement
yeah.
in Canada for, depending on what position you have. The CSC is a regulatory requirement. So there could be equivalencies, like level 1 could be considered the same as having this requirement.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could get to that point. Making it a general requirement, I think, would be difficult unless you made it more accessible. The pass rate on the CSC is almost 100%. You can't have it so difficult that nobody can get it, because you do need people to fill these jobs.
Yeah.
You would have to have some watered down version of it that met regulatory minimum requirements. The CFA goes well beyond minimum regulatory requirements. So its value becomes what the employer sees the value at. And there could be some jobs where employers say, I'm sorry, but this is the minimum qualification, or this is the minimum standard that you would need. I would think that would be probably more of a reality than having a regulator saying you need this. A regulator may say, if you have this, it's the equivalent of having these licenses.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's just as good as well. So CFA level 1 is the equivalent of CSC 1, but CSC 1 does not equal CFA 1, because CFA 1 is so much bigger than CSC that if you've done level 1, you've done CSC level 1. That you should be able to walk in and take that exam without a problem. No, I don't know that it would ever become a regulatory requirement in its current form. There may be a scaled down version, maybe, if they want to get a regulatory requirement, but it would be more likely to be a substitute for that. If you had the charter holder, it's equivalent to having these three exams behind you as well. That it's considered equivalent to these things. I think that that would be not a far stretch at all, because you already see that in Canada.
Yeah.
So,
And I did the CFP program, which recognizes the CFA designation as, or the CFA charter as counting towards the education requirements that the CFP, sets as a minimum guideline. So I didn't have to do any of those education requirements. I was just able to take the test. There's definitely, and I didn't know that about the Canadian Securities Certificate, you said?
the Canadian Securities Course, yeah.
Okay.
It is a regulatory requirement, and having CFA 1 behind you means you have CSC 1 behind you as well.
So I would love to see the charter get more overlap, or this or that type uses throughout the globe, and that only further increases the argument for its value. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the job of the institute, right? That is what they do, is to promote the charter worldwide. They are an accreditation body, but they are a promotion body as well. They do try to get these things placed in the market. Try to convince regulators that, look, this is just as good as having this, things like that. For the accreditation side, they administer the exams each year. There's so many conspiracy theories that, it's all about money, it's about this, it's about that. I have a good relationship with quite a few of the people there. Yeah, that is simply not true. That the low pass rates are just as much a cause of concern for them as it is for candidates. However, they're not going to fudge numbers just to avoid something unpleasant like a 29% pass rate. It's going to be what it's going to be. All they're going to do is say, let's statistically make sure that this is the real thing. And if it is what it is. They're not going to sacrifice the integrity of their process just because there's an inconvenient pass rate at this point in time. So, to think with everybody who thinks that maybe they're evil and that there's these, there's too many charter holders and the existing charter holders want fewer. Were you ever sent a questionnaire by CFAI where you could put your input as to saying, no, I agree, there are too many? Did they call you up and ever ask you any of these questions?
They didn't do any of that, no. And
So
I don't.
who's doing this?
Right.
Who's telling them that all this is going on? Nobody's telling them that this is going on. I don't receive any. I'm not on any email list saying, "Hey, psst, psst, come here." There's no shadowy cabal that's trying to limit the amount of charter holders. It's simply just not happening. It's simply not true. They're a bunch of good people, from what I've seen. All the people I've spoken to are good people doing their job, and yeah, it's puzzling right now why these pass rates are so low, and they are looking for reasons why, and they think they have one.
Yep.
And they've done something this past year they've never ever done, which is put out videos explaining what they're doing.
Yeah, they're being very transparent about it.
For them, that's huge. Even though it might be cryptic at times, you listen, you go, yeah, it didn't tell me very much. It's still a huge step for them to even address the issue. So they are taking steps towards it. This will work itself out. We'll get through this volatility and it'll work itself out. But what I don't want to see is the content being watered down, it being made easier, just so that more people can get through this process. It should be rigorous. It should separate the population, and only those that really have the passion for it should make it through. And again, to revisit these people, the integrity to be in this industry, because in this industry, it's all about trust. The entire market is built on trust. If trust disappears, the markets fall apart.
Right.
The entire industry is based on trust. Customers and clients come to see you and entrust their money with you because of trust. If you have no integrity, you're not going to make it. We spend so much time building our resumes and so little time building our character. Put as much effort into building your character as you do building your resume, because your resume is only one thing. Your character is going to show through, and you will, at any job you show up to, you will eventually show up, and your coworkers will eventually figure out who you are. Do you want to play the long game or the short game? So those are my closing thoughts.
Well, perfect. Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate your time in this interview and this conversation. I think it's going to make for some really interested viewers too, because we got into a lot of personal, but also economic and CFA related stuff. It's been really fun.
Excellent. Okay. Nobody should complain about that.
Right.
Lots of.
Okay. So. Well, thanks everyone. And, drop comments down below or whatever. I'll respond to some. Mark, you'll probably see some of the video, and let's see. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.